had come into my house, and the door was open, and she was there to feed my dog while we were out on our Girl Scout camp out. And she was getting food and water for the dog, who was outside, and she turned around towards the doorway, and she saw a tall, shadowy figure in the open doorway of my house while she was inside getting the dog food, and she screamed and apparently dropped the dog food all over the floor, and saw around the corner, and it was a Tacoma Park police officer, and he said to her, he said, "Well, I saw that the door was open and the truck wasn't in the driveway, and so I thought something was amiss, so I thought I would come in and check, but you're just feeding the dog. Sorry." So apparently she cleaned up the dog food and fed the dog. But I thought it was a good story to share about the police department, that they saw a door open and no vehicle in the driveway and went to check it out. That's my story for tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Robinson.
I just came from a meeting of neighbors and our Public Works Director and our arborist on Allegheny. And the process has begun to try to find the best way to spend the allocation that my colleagues and I made last week. Was it that long ago, or that short period of time? 2 weeks? For that small pocket park. And there are a lot of swings on that little section of land, and I think it's going to turn out to be a very good expenditure, and I appreciate being able to go there and see the process and work there. It's a direct conversation between neighbors and Public Works, and the arborist and the city engineer was not there, but will be involved, and so that's the way it works best in our fair city. I'm glad to see it. And the only other thing I have tonight is to report that the giant holes on Kansas Avenue have been filled. They're a little gushy still, but this was a major water main break last Friday night, I think it was. Maybe it was Saturday. Big old portion of water came out and came all the way up to the windows and almost went into the house through the windows. But luckily there was a little retaining wall there, and that's over, so I'm glad of that too. Big news in my ward tonight.
And didn't that have an associated gas leak as well?
Yes. They dug down, the WSSC dug down to get to the leak, and they broke through a gas line. So then they had to stop, bring the gas company in, fix the gas line, and then they could get back to work.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight I'd like to just welcome a number of different people. First of all, the young activists. I appreciate your not only coming tonight, but also being so involved in our community and trying to make this a better place to live. And I thank you for your work and your energy. And also like to welcome the Ward 4 residents who are here in number tonight. Appreciate your coming out, again, working on the community to make it a better place. I also like to welcome a gentleman from Ethiopia who's visiting and came to the council meeting tonight to see what it is that we do, and also his son from Canada, from Toronto, Canada. So welcome. I'd like to, Barb, just thank you and the community development people and the recreation staff for the work that you've done to bring the young people's desire in Ward 4 to fruition. I see that the basketball court right outside the building here is just about completed, and I think that's a big step towards providing some alternatives for the young people rather than standing on the street corners. And then lastly, I would like to ask Barb if you could get a report from the county on the status of the ladder truck and when it will be returned to the city of Tacoma Park. The station is nearing completion. Since the county budget has been completed, I have certainly heard more than just rumor that plans have changed within the fire department, and the chief is shuffling the deck, and that the ladder truck may not end up back in Tacoma Park. So I think an official report would be very helpful. Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a long list of items, actually. I'll try and get through them quickly. First is 2 weeks from tonight, on June 21st, there'll be Ward 1 night here in the council chamber with a reception outside to begin with. We're working with the Old Town Business Association to have some of the the food, particularly dessert-like items, at that event. So hoping to get some wonderful offerings from one of the new eating establishments in town, Capital Cheesecake, as well as Summer Delight, one of the older establishments that has ice cream. So at least those two, and we're going to try and get more as well, so people can have a sampling of the food here in our city and from businesses in Ward 1. And if anyone out there in the audience watching on television has any particular issue they would like to talk about during that evening, feel free to email me or call me with that. The second item I want to talk about is to say a thank you to Barb and Yolanda. Now that the budget is done, I know that they worked tirelessly, and the budget didn't come out the way we want, but that isn't any fault of Barb's or Yolanda's. That has more to do with issues related to the county. So thank you, Barb. Which brings me to the next item, which is to me, the county has basically finalized their budget decision. We asked them to make some adjustment to how they were doing the allocation and allocate more to Tacoma Park based on the fact that our police rebate is much bigger than any of the other municipalities. They have decided not to do that. And I would just reiterate that I am not in support of the decision that they've made related to the rebate, and I think we need to continue to work to address that issue. Next is an item for you, Barb. I'm curious about whether State Highway has gotten back to us in any way about Philly and Chicago. Again, there was many discussions about what could be done at that intersection to improve the pedestrian safety. And that intersection is interesting because it's one right near the college and Silver Spring International Park. And the bus stops right there. And what you often get is the bus parked or stopped, letting people off, and cars driving around the bus into the opposite oncoming lane of traffic, as well as having a blind spot about people crossing the crosswalk. And I thought we'd reached agreement with SHA that they were going to put something, paddles and something that was in the median strip that would actually prevent people from doing that, basically waiting their turn till the bus would move along. And so if you could look into that would be great. Next item is the basketball court. I'm also excited to see that the basketball court is progressing. I do want to raise the issue that I, again, need to make sure that the basketball court has good supervision by a combination of the rec staff and the police department checking on it, and that it's a joy for the children as well as the surrounding neighbors and how it's used. Two more items. One is the tree ordinance, which I'm very much of support of in the city, but I think it's time for updating. So I've asked for a Word copy of the tree ordinance so I can make some edits and share that with my council colleagues. And there's two issues in particular that I'm going to propose that we look at related to the tree ordinance. The first is that would enable people to get credit for planting trees early. One of the challenges now is that people have no incentive to plant a tree because they may want to remove another tree in the future, and then they still have to pay to have that new tree planted. And it would actually help us with one of the problems we have in that our canopy is generally aging. So we should be doing everything we can to encourage people to plant trees now. And one of the things I think would be wise and the arborist I think is in favor of this. It's not something that he's against. He's actually in favor of it. I think he is extremely busy and hardworking and just hasn't had time to make that adjustment to the ordinance. So that's the first thing that I think generally I'm supportive of, and I've heard my council colleagues are supportive of, and I think it would be a relatively easy fix, and the city could monitor. People could get credit in advance for having planted a tree if they want it, and that could be banked towards not entitling them to remove a tree later, but if their permit were approved, that they would get credit for that tree they planted. The second thing that I think we need to consider is and look at, and I'm not exactly sure where I come down on this, but is the issue of tree removal related to solar panels. So I wouldn't advocate that someone should cut down 8 or 10 trees to put in solar panels, but I would suggest that there may be situations where if there were one tree that were to be removed and solar panels were to go up, that would definitely have a much greater impact on the carbon footprint issue, that maybe that's a good idea. Now, maybe the person also should have to do some rainwater mitigation, because the tree doesn't only address the carbon issues, it also addresses rainfall and runoff issues. So I think it's something we need to look at closely. This is an issue that's come up in my ward with one individual who has one of the most environmentally conscious houses I've seen. He has a complete rainwater system and a corn stove and wants to put in solar panels, but he has one tree that's old and actually partially a disease, but not at the standard where you would be able to remove it without replacement. And by the statute, he's required to replace it with 23 trees. Now, this gentleman's lot is much smaller than this room, and so I don't quite see how he would fit 23 trees onto the lot. The other option is that he pay to have the trees replaced, and he can pay the city, but the cost of that would be, under what he's been told so far, about $4,000, which makes the solar panels cost prohibitive. So I think we need to look at it and see if there might be some nuance that we can use with the tree ordinance to adjust it slightly. And the last item has to do with blue tarps. So I'm just completely fed up. Since I've been in office, there's been a house in my ward that has a blue tarp on its roof. It's obviously meant to be a temporary fix for some underlying structural problem with the roof, but the tarp has remained there. I've been told that it's not a code violation to have a tarp on. So what I would like to propose is that we change the city code around code enforcement and put in, it won't be in exactly this language, but says that you can't have a temporary tarp or a blue tarp or any colored tarp on your roof for a period of more than X number of months, 3, 6 months, unless you have an active building permit. Now, I realize sometimes people might need to do a big house renovation and they need to have the tarp on there for a long time. As long as they have an active building permit, they'd be allowed to have the tarp on there. But a temporary tarp is not a solution for having a real roof over your house. And what will happen is that if that issue is not addressed, eventually the whole roof will cave in and we'll end up with a situation on Cedar, where this house is, like we have on Philadelphia, 36 Philadelphia. So simply what I want to do is give the city code enforcement people the ability to enforce some logical code around tarps. So those are the two, trees and tarps are the two legislative items I wanted to just address tonight.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz.
Oh, I said I forgot to push my button, so I'll have to practice button pushing. Several things that I wanted to first bring to the attention of the residents of Ward 6, which I represent. If any of them happen to be watching or will be looking at this videotape of our meeting, I think this is important for them to be aware of if they're not already aware of it, and that is that this week we understand that on New Hampshire Avenue, the state, which is a state highway, is going to begin milling the surface of New Hampshire Avenue from Holden Lane down the hill and up the hill to East-West Highway, all 6 lanes, and then putting 2 new asphalt layers down. They've been working on this project since well into the past year, doing a lot of sidewalk work and curb work, and this will be the culmination of that. So within about a month or so, all of this will be completed, and it'll look like a brand new street. At the same time, on Wildwood Drive and in Ward 6 and on Kirkland Avenue, the city is getting ready to install 3 mini traffic circles, which are the culmination of several years of traffic calming planning between the city staff on the one hand and the community of New Hampshire Gardens on the other hand. And so we're pleased to see that that's going to be happening. And all of that will be completed by the end of June. I wanted to sort of second or back up what Terry Siemens, the point that Councilman Siemens raised with regard to the fire engine. I just think that this is a really serious issue that I think our community at large needs to pay attention to. The fact that we temporarily lost our ladder truck is one thing. The fact that it's not clear when this temporariness will actually end. It may be a year or 2 years was the last I heard, and we're not even sure if it's going to be that soon. We're a community of a lot of high-rise buildings, and we're a community of a lot of old buildings. And this ladder truck is very important for the safety and the rescuing of people. Something you can't easily do with just a mere pumper truck. Doesn't mean that we're not going to have coverage. Obviously, we will. The fire department, Montgomery County, and Prince George's aren't going to allow that to happen. But the simple fact is that the time that it takes for these pieces of equipment to get to the scene is going to be a little bit longer than it should be. And when we witness the fact that we've got a brand-new firehouse on Carroll Avenue at Philadelphia, an absolutely beautiful facility that's designed to hold a ladder truck. And the ladder truck was removed so that the firehouse could be built, and now that the firehouse is virtually complete, we don't get our ladder truck back. Somehow or another, doesn't seem right. A couple other things. I want to remind people that the Crossroads Farmers Market started, it opened for the first time this past Wednesday, and will be functioning every Wednesday from, I think, 3 in the afternoon till 7 p.m. Over in front of the Crossroads Professional Building in the 7600 block of New Hampshire Avenue. It's right smack on New Hampshire Avenue. You cannot miss it. There are about twice as many vendors this year as there were in the past. Last year it was in a sort of out of sight on Holton Lane, so now it's got a really visible site. Some of the vendors are selling organic fruits and vegetables, and others non-organic fruits and vegetables, but as you know, it's all locally farmer grown, and the city of Tacoma Park is supporting it. So we encourage you, if you can, always get to the Tacoma Farmers Market on Sunday, to come by on Wednesday. It's a delight. We went there, and the best part of it all was there was a guy selling snowballs when it was about 96 degrees, and I would have paid him $100 for one of those snowballs, but it only turned out to be $2. So that was a deal. And finally, the one thing I do want to mention that really doesn't have much reference to things that you might be familiar with, but I think it's important to know that I've been trying to work with a large program that's actually based in Arlington County that specializes in microenterprise loans. These are loans of less than $35,000 that are designed for people who are starting businesses or who have small businesses and get loans that are too small for most banks to even bother with. And microenterprise loans are designed to help people, particularly minorities and low-income people. For example, a vendor at the Crossroads Market, farmers market, might find something like this to be very useful. And this is a program that's been long established in Northern Virginia. It's a very large and very successful program that I've personally been affiliated with for 20 years, and we're hoping very soon that they're going to be opening an office over in the Tacoma Langley area that will be serving the whole Tacoma Park Langley region and making loans, small business loans available. I'm excited about that because I've been on the board of this organization for many years, and I think it'll be a great opportunity for small businesses in Tacoma Park. I'll let you know more about that later when we get more facts and information on that. But I want citizens to know that this is something that I think is going to be coming in the very near future, certainly this year. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens, you have an additional comment?
Yeah, Councilmember Schultz mentioned the farmers market, and I know last year that many of the residents of Ward 4 and Victory Towers really enjoyed the market, found it very helpful, and was good food at a good price. Unfortunately, this year, the farmers market has not been able to afford the bus service to transport people from Ward 4 and from up in the Old Town area to the farmers market. And I would just like to suggest that any community members that would like to help the farmers market, one way they might do that would be to sponsor a day of bus trips for people in the Ward 4 and the Old Town area to the market. I understand it would, for $125, they could sponsor one day of bus, or one day a week that they have it, that they could sponsor the bus for one day. Anyway, it's just a suggestion. If anybody's interested, they could contact, I guess, the city clerk, and she'll get them in touch with the right people. Thank you.
Okay, I just have one quick item. Last Friday, I had the pleasure of touring a number of green roofs in the Washington area, and including the American Society of Landscape Architects. And there was a lot of good information that was given out. I don't know if any of my colleagues would like to see this publication in particular, but what I want to do is get this eventually down the line to the city manager so she can share it with the Public Works Director, because it has some good information on maintaining a new green roof. And since ours has only been a green roof for a couple of months, there's some good suggestions in here about how to maintain and have your green roof flourish, and also other options. They had very interesting options for putting grates over top of green planted areas so that you didn't have to just use, like on ours, where there are, I'll call them concrete stepping stones, I don't know how else to describe them, but pathways. In this green roof, the whole area was green, and they had metal grates over top of it with the green growing up through, and it made a much bigger area. So I'm not necessarily saying we need to immediately change our roof, but as people might want to look at our roof, there's some other options that have become available, even just in the short time since ours was planned. So there's some very interesting information in here. Maybe I'll pass it down this way. Anybody wants to look at it can, and then we'll get it back over that way to the city manager. The next item is additional agenda items and agenda scheduling update. We don't have any additional items. One thing that we are going to do, however, is reorder one item on tonight's agenda. Item 1, the resolution regarding disposable polystyrene food, is going to move up in the agenda to immediately after this update and before public comment, so that the young people who are here about that item can get to bed at a decent hour, since this is a school night.
Mayor,
Yes.
I would like to pull item A off of the consent agenda so that we can discuss that.
Okay, we will
Thank
do
you.
that as well. So I'll just give a quick agenda update on a couple future items, and then we'll go to the reordered agenda. I just want to remind my colleagues that including tonight's meeting, there are 7 city council meetings between now and August. So we go on break in August, and there aren't that many meetings until we do. Since we don't have a meeting on June 28th, which is the Monday when we're in Ocean City at the Maryland Municipal League Convention. As Councilmember Wright mentioned, 2 weeks from tonight is Ward 1 night. Also on that night, we're having a presentation from the police department with their report on tasers, as promised. We also have a resolution authorizing the submission of legislative action requests, so if anybody has any items that we might want to consider submitting to the Maryland Municipal League for priority next year in Annapolis, those need to come in now so that we're ready to decide on what we're going to suggest, if any, on the 21st, 2 weeks from tonight. Another item on that evening is also a work session discussion of the proposed Tacoma Junction Task Force. And then 2 weeks after that, Tuesday, July 6th, since Monday the 5th is a holiday, we'll be having a presentation and a discussion of the Task Force on Environmental Action Report. So I just wanted to remind folks of those couple items coming up.
Mayor Williams?
Yes.
You and I had spoken on email about the renaming of Tacoma Urban Park to Gilbert Combe Park. Is that
Yes.
something that fits into the scheduling?
The clerk was going to put something in the July newsletter about that.
Right, I believe you and I were going to discuss how best to get the word out about that.
Okay.
And,
So the word will get out, and then it will go on the agenda after that
for discussion in July.
in July. Okay, good. Thank you.
Did we already discuss that? And we covered that in a previous meeting? I swear we had that discussion already.
We discussed it, but we didn't do anything about it.
I thought that was the decision. Okay.
Next, we will move to agenda item 1, which is the resolution regarding use of city funds for purchase of disposable polystyrene food, serviceware products. Don't want to have polystyrene food. Would somebody like to move that resolution?
I would like to introduce that.
Okay. Somebody have one second?
Second.
I think I heard Councilmember Snipper.
Yes.
So moved by Councilmember Clay, second by Councilmember Snipper. Is there any council comment on this resolution?
Well, I want to thank all the young people for bringing this to us, and I appreciate all the work that you guys do on behalf of the city and on behalf of the issues that you have. I had a really interesting conversation with my daughter last night, who is in 6th grade at Eastern Middle School and is working on this project on political and social values, and she was trying to think about ways that she interacts, and what the political values mean to her, and how she was going to write up this report, because she thought, well, I don't really have much in the way of political values, and I don't really see how that impacts me. Well, she doesn't think about it in that way. And so I started talking to her, and I said, well, when you think about what the structure of your government means to your daily life, think about how you get to interface with this at the local level. And one of the great examples of that was the first time when the kids from the Young Activists came with their goggles on and their flippers and their inflatable inner tubes and swimsuits and everything, and they got to come and they got to speak before the council. And I think that that's a really great thing, that you guys are already starting to engage in this activity at your age, and I commend you, and I am so happy to see that not only are you engaging in the activity, but you kind of have created a movement within your school. So you got the pool reopened, and then you went on to the next projects, which has been the dishwasher, which has been an ongoing activity, and related to that has been the stacks of the styrofoam trays, and related to that was more awareness of the impact of styrofoam, and while you're still working on your dishwasher activity, you've brought this other activity to the council to get more engaged in getting the council to deal with the styrofoam issues. And I really applaud you for that, and the way that you've actually built some capacity in your school for activism and civic engagement in your hometown community. So thank you very much for that. So I'm really happy that you brought this to the council. We've started with this issue where the council has agreed that the city won't purchase things. We're going to move essentially to compostable and biodegradable cutlery and products, I think, which is an okay start. I'd like to see us do more. As I've said before on the council, when I came from Santa Cruz, we banned styrofoam coolers, which made a huge impact on the Santa Cruz beaches. We banned the use of styrofoam in fast food establishments, so that got rid of the styrofoam cups, and it got rid of the styrofoam clamshells. And at first, industry said, oh my gosh, it can't be done. What would McDonald's do without the little, the clamshell, thank you, the little styrofoam clamshell. But in fact, the movement helped change an industry, and for the most part now, when you go into fast food places, you get biodegradable paper clamshells. And so I want you to keep thinking about that in terms of Tacoma Park, and keep pushing the elected leaders here in the council and also at the county council to take this further, because I think this is a small step in the right direction, and we could keep moving this forward. I would suggest that plastic bags, as DC's put their plastic bag task, tax, but possibly plastic bags might be a place to go next. So again, I want to thank all of you for this.
Councilmember Owens.
One time, not so long ago, I had a client, it was the World Wildlife Fund, and I would go down there for presentations, and I went to a presentation one time, and they had a big stack of styrofoam cups that they were serving juices in, and somebody stood up from the audience and said, "What do you guys think you're doing? You're the World Wildlife Fund. What are you doing serving plastic cups?" And there was a great deal of embarrassment in the room. I can't say I know whether World Wildlife Fund stopped serving styrofoam cups, but it was, the idea is similar to the idea that you're bringing forth now, which is let's see some leadership from us up here and staff to make it better where we are, and then hopefully we can extend that and make it better in other places, in addition to going to other places and starting from them. So that story comes to my mind. I just wanted to share it. I thank you also for bringing this up.
Councilmember Ray.
I want to say you all are amazing and powerful. Thank you for all that you've done for our city. Every time I go to the Piney Branch pool and swim with my 6-year-old daughter and my 3-year-old son, I think of you all and the fight that you put up to keep the pool open. And we were able to be small contributors and partners with you in that as the city council, but really it wouldn't have happened without you. So I want to thank you for that. I know that you all have been fighting about the trays and the dishwashers for a long time, and with the school system, I encourage you to continue to fight. If you look at most social movements and social change that's happened across this country, it doesn't happen easily, and many times it takes many swings at the plate to get the powers that be to change. We're behind you, and we'll continue to encourage you and ask that the school system and the county change their position on that. But I think ultimately it's going to change because you continue to push them and find the sources of power that you have to influence them. I'm very proud to be able to vote in favor of this resolution that we have before us, and like Councilmember Clay, I think this is the first step of what we need to do in the city, and I look forward to you all educating our residents about this issue further and bringing back additional changes that we can make legislatively to further reduce polystyrene in our city, and including eventually banning it from establishments. If they won't do it voluntarily after some education, perhaps we'll have to do it by the power of law. So again, I appreciate all of you very much. Thank you.
Councilmember Snipper.
Thank you, Mayor. I too want to thank you for the pool. I've enjoyed the pool greatly. I think it's a wonderful example of what a little bit of persistence will do. You get the adults around you to do the right thing. And I have another example, which I was thinking about when I was reading this resolution this weekend. When you guys came before the council the last time to talk about washable trays, I mentioned that I had tried to get washable trays in my work cafeteria, and that I, in fact, had acquired a plastic tray, which I use when I go to the cafeteria, and I wash it myself. But I didn't give up, because I knew you guys didn't give up, and I worked with a group of other folks to get the cafeteria to switch to compostable utensils. Before they would switch to compostable utensils, though, they insisted on doing a survey of the patrons, because they were sure that the patrons would not pay a little bit extra to have compostable utensils. Lo and behold, were they surprised. Overwhelmingly, people said yes. We'll pay the penny or two that it might cost us to have compostable. And in addition, after that, we had a little success, because they are now offering washable trays, in addition to the, unfortunately, polystyrene ones they still have. But a lot of people use those washable trays, and we are making slow but steady progress. And I want to thank you for making me feel like I should do my little part. I mean, after all, if a bunch of school kids can do it, why can't I do it? So I did, and I want to thank you for that. And I thoroughly support the effort, and just as the other council members have said, I hope we can if education and a little guilt doesn't work, we might have to step this up and do some more to get the businesses in Tacoma Park to switch to better materials than polystyrene. Thanks.
Councilmember Schultz.
Well, I don't want to be the last to thank you, because you deserve a great deal of thanks for what you've tried to do. It's taken a long time to get this far, and you still haven't had the satisfaction of getting the school board, people that run the school system, to change their mind about polystyrene trays and dishwashers. But I have a funny feeling that you're going to succeed at some point. You're just going to wear them down. They're just going to say, we're going to give in because we can't stand the constant nagging from these young people. I predict great victories ahead for you. I'm very excited about what you're doing, and I'm proud of you and our city for supporting you. So I'm going to vote, of course, for the resolution. And I also want you to know that I'm very interested in seeing what we can do about abolishing the use of plastic bags all over the city of Tacoma Park and making all plastic bags, except for those that are designated as biodegradable, prohibited. But that's a war for a different Monday night. Thank you for your work, and I appreciate it. You should be proud.
Councilmember Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to be real quick. Are there any young activists here tonight? I can't hear you. Are any young activists here tonight? Yes. All right. Could you stand up so we can see who's here? Great. Well, thank you. Now, do you think... Do you think that the city should stop buying the polystyrene? Yes. What more do we need to know? Thank you very much. You guys are awesome.
And I just want to add that I think you all have time and energy on your side because you're young. You can keep at this a long time. There's plenty of battles yet ahead. Keep at it, and really appreciate all your efforts. And I wanted to show you what I brought with me this evening, which is compostable utensils and a compostable plate. So I've got these ready to use the next time I need some. And these are what the city will be using. So we're ready to pass this resolution, but we want to make sure that we hear from anybody in the audience who wants to make any comments. So if anybody would like to, please come to the podium. We'll recognize Mr. Lovelace first in the back.
Hello, my name is Patty Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park, Maryland. Your favorite and official peace delegate. I want to thank the Young Activists Club for taking up this issue, because there's a lot of issues like this we're going to be taking up pretty soon. For example, on beer cans and on soda cans, you find these 6 rings of plastic that you hook the 6-packs together. Those things there end up in our waterways and end up in our streams and our fishes and our marine mammals and stuff are getting trapped in them and end up drowning because they cannot get their jaws out of that stuff, and they end up choking on it, and they end up literally drowning. Have to hang themselves on it. And that's another thing I'd like to see Tacoma Park ban, is those 6-ring plastic death traps for our animals, because a lot of them end up in our streams, in our ponds, in our lakes. We got to do everything we can to stop that, and I appreciate the Young Activists Club for bringing up polystyrene and styrofoam stuff, because I never thought about it for a long time, that stuff leaches into my food and stuff. It may give me cancer later on top of everything I've already got. And I also, the Young Activists Club, they are what my dream is to see come true. I dream of a day when the peace movement accepts the young people and the youth of our nation and our schools as part and a very powerful force to be used in our peace movement. You know, because maybe eventually we won't have these things like pollution and oil spills and war and stuff like that. If we can take a lesson from our children. Thank you very much for letting me share.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment? If you can come to the podium.
Well, there's been like a lot of people supporting us, and I'd just like to say thank you. We had a lot of people that signed our petition, like hundreds of them, and I saw them in the stacks of paper, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who supports us, and I'm happy that we've gotten this far.
Thank you. And what's your name?
Vivian? Vivian?
Vivian. Thank you, Vivian. And if everybody can just make sure you give us your name.
I'm Anna, and I'd like to say thank you so much for passing this resolution here. I really think it's a big help for everything, and it's also going to keep our city healthy and our earth healthy. And I really think that thank you so much for passing this resolution, and we really appreciate it.
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Well, my name's Noah, and I just want to say thank you for letting us be here and for listening to what we're saying and helping us pass this resolution to ban polystyrene trays. I just want to say thank you.
My name's Emily, and I wanted to say thank you for passing this resolution and supporting us, because we really care about the environment. So, yeah.
I'm Heather DeMalker, and we're pretty much speaking together. I again want to say thank you, because you guys have helped us so much in our fight. You're supporting us, and, well, you're not really only supporting us, but you're supporting the environment and also other schools who want to take on this fight, and I really want to say thank you.
I'm Camille Kirsch, and I'd like to say that I'm very proud of my little sister's school for taking up this movement to ban polystyrene from their school, and I'm going to try my best to bring this movement.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
I'm Elena Grassi. I'm a resident of Ward 4, and I really applaud this decision that the city has made about using compostable, things. But one thing that is important to keep in mind is that compostable items are good only if they are disposed in the compost, right? There was an article recently in Times Magazine that talked about compostable, trays and things like that. And if you throw those items in the regular trash, what happens is that they're buried in a landfill and they decompose in an aerobic way. They produce methane, and methane is a gas that contributes to the greenhouse gases, and it's a bad problem that we have. So one important note here is that not only we need to use compostable items, but we need to make sure that there is a structure in our city, whereas those compostable items go to the place where they're supposed to go. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would also commend all of the young activists for providing another model of good citizenship, which is your comments were nice and short and sweet. May we all learn a lesson. Anybody else like to comment? Okay, then we will vote on this resolution, which basically says that the city will cease purchasing polystyrene, resin code number 6, food serviceware, and that organizers of public events, businesses, families, and individuals in Tacoma Park are encouraged to seek and use alternatives to polystyrene food serviceware. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all very much. We will now go back up the agenda to public comment period, which is the period set aside for comments that are not on the regular voting session this evening. So if you have any comments to make on anything not on the agenda or anything on our work session agenda, now is the time. If you can please come to the podium, identify yourself, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. Ooh, and the podium goes up.
Whoa. This is amazing. Okay, my name is Richard Payne. I live at 39 Oswego Avenue. I'm the president of the Ritchie Citizens Association and here to speak about the traffic restrictions in Sligo Park Hills. I'd like to thank council members for their time. I learned a lot during the week, and apologize to those that I couldn't get to. So the council's decision to restrict traffic through Sligo Park Hills is a done deal. It was always so. Traffic volumes there were way above those for which restrictions could be applied under the rather rigid county regulations, with 200 vehicles per hour travelling down narrow streets and queues of 6 to 20 vehicles at the intersection with Piney Branch Road. Some years ago, when Councilmember Siemens told us about this petition, we asked the City of Tacoma Park to commission an additional traffic study with the county that would answer two questions for us. Firstly was whether the traffic that would be diverted from Sligo Park Hills, would some of it come down Ritchie Avenue? And the answer in that study was yes. And what was the current traffic volume on Ritchie Avenue? And they found it to be 169 vehicles per hour at peak times, one vehicle about every 20 seconds down Ritchie Avenue, and just shy of the 181 vehicles per hour that triggered the original petition to the county from Hilltop Avenue. So Ritchie Avenue residents would love it if we could restrict nothing and have the diverted traffic go elsewhere spontaneously. But we doubt that it will. Once the Sligo Park Hills restrictions go into place in about 90 days, Ritchie Avenue will be the only street that intersects with Sligo Avenue, which is where much of the traffic was going to through Sligo Park Hills. It was traveling into Silver Spring. Neither do we take much comfort from the deterrent effect of having to cross Piney Branch without a traffic light on Ritchie. 6 to 20 car backups were witnessed on Sligo Park Hills streets. And we already have, at the moment, 3 to 5 car backups during the morning rush hour on Ritchie and Piney Branch. So we expect that if some of the traffic comes our way, we could just recreate the situation that caused all the problems in Sligo Park Hills. And we don't think that that's of value to anybody in the community who uses Ritchie Avenue to get across to Silver Spring. So we've proposed a reasonable plan that would temporarily divert rush hour traffic through our streets, coming from the direction of Sligo Creek Parkway only, while traffic calming measures are enacted and new commuting patterns are established. Once calming measures are enacted, we expect to take the signs down, subject to account of traffic volume, to make sure that we're not being overwhelmed once more. Why not do it the other way around? Well, we think commuting is a habit, and we think that if we can divert the traffic temporarily onto Sligo Creek Parkway, we'll do very well. There are other communities that have proposed different solutions, and Denise Jones will explain those. And RCA supports any solution that will drop the volume in our neighborhood. We do not wish to gate our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jose Luis Contreras. I'm a resident of Ward 4 for the last 10 years plus, half of them on Maple, half of them on Ritchie. And I want to offer 3 reasons why you should implement the traffic restrictions. First, this is a study professionally done with input from the county, the city, and the community involved that has gone for a year. And we should, pay attention to what the experts say on the matter, taking into account the regulations in terms of traffic and safety. So we cannot second guess that and reject it because we don't like it or because it's not convenient. The second, there are many opinions around from neighbors, the council members, but in fact there is no professional alternate solution. There is no question we need to have a citywide rethinking of the problem, appropriate study, but we don't have it now. What we have is a study that has been done by the county with input from all of us here, and I think that's the best thing we have at the moment, and we should support that. which brings to my third is, will be responsible to do nothing here. We have a city that is renowned for the tree ordinance, but we cannot pass something that it will take care of our children, our citizens. I mean, we have a really safety problem here. It's documented. It's not on the air. We have a traffic study done on this regard. And so, but what is the solution? Well, we all like to be able to drive and walk everywhere. I'm one of them. But in the absence of an alternate study, we need to implement what we know, the study we have, and at the same time, we need to have a citywide study that will address the problem for all of us. And then, if that study suggests that with the appropriate traffic calming measure, we can remove the traffic restriction, then that would be great. There is already a precedent for that in the Pine Crest traffic study. They implemented restriction there based on the traffic calming study, additional, then they were removed. So that's what we're asking here. Don't let us go alone on this. We're going to get all these problems because of the incoming county implementation of the traffic measures. So we ask for your help, now to implement that. Carry a study that's formally done across the city, and based on that, we can come back and see where we need to remove this restriction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sherry Redunk. I live at 110 Ritchie, and I'm a member of the Ritchie Citizens Association. My husband was active in the petition on getting once our ward found out about the Sligo Park Hills restrictions, and being proactive. And so that's what I would like to encourage the council to be, proactive. Like our president said, the Sligo Park Hills restrictions will be put in place. We have a couple of proposals that are for your consideration. The county was more restrictive, and one of our own at Ward 4 has given some options that are a little less restrictive. But the problem is that there will be enormous increase in traffic on Ritchie, Geneva, and Oswego. So what we ask is that you would consider one of those alternatives, traffic calming measures, and monitoring. And like Pepe said, if in fact after a review of the restrictions that are put in place to be proactive to the Sligo Park Hills closure, it's found that it's not necessary, then those traffic things could be removed, those signs could be removed. But in the meantime, we will be proactive in making sure that Ritchie Citizens Association does not become victim to increased traffic. We have seniors, we have a child care center, we have the Hefner Park with no clear crosswalks. So I encourage the council to seriously consider one of the two options that were made available to you to be proactive in the closure that's going to be affecting the Ritchie Citizens Association. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Denise Jones, and I live on Maple Avenue, 7777 Maple, in Ward 4. I am opposed to traffic restrictions on Ritchie. There are more than 4 times the number of people who live on Maple Avenue between the hospital and Philadelphia than live on Ritchie. And they will be the ones who will be most adversely affected by restrictions. However, I understand that people do have concerns about the increase traffic flow, I'm not convinced that we'll necessarily, now that Sligo Creek Parkway is open, that we'll necessarily see a big influx on Ritchie Avenue with commuter cut-through traffic. The local residents use the local roads, and I think we have a right to be able to use our local roads, to be able to go to work, take our kids to daycare, take our children to the 4 elementary and 3 middle schools that are in our area, and to be able to get to the metro in downtown Silver Spring. What I'm proposing instead, and Ritchie Avenue, unlike Sligo Hills, has sidewalks. You have a sidewalk. They don't have one at all. 6 traffic humps, a stop sign, but I know that there's a bit of a confusion at the top of the hill by that stop sign, so I am also supporting some kind of traffic calming circle or something at the top of Ritchie, at Geneva there. I'm also proposing that there be a no left turn sign from Sligo Creek Parkway onto Maple Avenue for morning commuter traffic, to continue to force them along on Sligo Creek Parkway up to Pine Branch. There's a lot of traffic that comes down Maple Avenue. Ritchie Avenue should not be exempt from the commuter traffic. I know that Maple Avenue is a major thoroughfare in this town, but we shouldn't have to bear the brunt of all the traffic either. And with a big bend in the road coming around the corner toward my building from Sligo Creek Parkway around to 7777 Maple at the corner of Lincoln and Maple, there's the traffic comes zooming around there as well. And then one last thing I want to say before I finish is that I understand that people don't want the traffic, but we live in a city. You know, I've lived in Tacoma Park for 15 years, and it's always been known as the city of Tacoma Park. We are a stone's throw away from the D.C. line, and I don't think that it is fair or right for us to act like we do not live in a city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Pat Lovelace again, 7620 Maple Avenue, Ward 4, your official peace delegate. I just want to a couple of announcements. One is on June the 10th, we're having a demonstration, a candlelight vigil against torture over in Greenbelt, in front of the Greenbelt Community Center, which is near the library. And also, I'd like to let people know that on June the 29th, 30th, and July 1st and 2nd, we're having our annual Starving for Justice protest against the death penalty down at the Supreme Court. And for people who can't get down to the executions and down to the vigils, we can always come down to the Supreme Court and protest the death penalty down there. That we need as many people as we can get, because we can reach out to tourists, we can reach out to other people, we can reach out to friends and stuff and get them to come on down. And we can also educate people while we're down there on the necessity to ban the death penalty, because that is another thing. A war has come home to the hood. And that's another way of dispatching our black people, our disenfranchised, our poor people. You never seen a rich white man go to the electric chair. I haven't, not yet. And we got to do everything we can to stop that. And also on July the 10th, we're having a Take Back the Land demonstration down in Shaw in D.C., and I'll keep you guys updated on that. And another question, I've brought this up before. Why can't we have a telephone system for call-ins? You know, if people can't make it to the meeting, or if people have something they want to say and they just simply can't get to the meeting for some reason or another, or they're taking care of their families or something, they should have a phone number they can call in and reach the podium, like a podium line of some kind, so that we can get a more broad spectrum on the public comment, because I think there's a lot of people out there who'd like to be able to call in when they can, and we don't have any lines for call-ins. It'd be nice if we could. And also, I'd like to ask people, please register to vote. This is your city, your city council, your Senate, your Congress. We've got a good group in Annapolis. We want to keep them in Annapolis. So if you want to vote, your vote will help keep them in Annapolis, or your absence of voting will help cost them their jobs and cost us a good city council. So please, remember, your vote does count. So please, a right into passage into adulthood is not drinking at graduation, it's registering to vote when you turn 18. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Other people have any comments?
Hi, Elena Grassi, 117 Ritchie Avenue. I'm here to let you know that I hope that the city will support the resolution that is on the table tonight, asking for calming measures and temporary traffic restrictions. When we were in this process of doing the Ritchie Avenue study, the traffic study, I had the occasion to meet with the traffic engineer. And, you know, one of the things that we went over was like, well, the study that was done, as you can see here in the handout that was given to us, is limited to a restricted area, small area. And it doesn't really reflect, when we have this figure of 169 cars on Ritchie Avenue that everybody's talking about, everybody says, oh, that's not that terrible. But what the engineer explained to me is that I told him, I see a lot more cars than that on Ritchie Avenue. And he told me, well, I'm just limited to the area of study that is marked in yellow in this handout. And that doesn't reflect the cars that come from other areas. And as you can see, the surrounding areas are fairly broad, and they feed a lot of traffic on Ritchie Avenue already, which is not reflected in this study. However, even based on the study, the county issued a recommendation that measures be implemented. And we, as citizens, need to be protected and need to go along with the recommendations of the county, I believe, because a lot of people are making arguments here about their convenience to go to work, their convenience to do this, and their convenience to do that. But this is a safety issue, and I think the city of Tacoma Park, God forbid that one day there is an accident or something, could even be liable, you know, for not implementing the recommendations that have been issued by the county based on a professional study, traffic study that was done. So I really hope that the council members will support the resolution and perhaps do a bigger study after the temporary restrictions are implemented, citywide study, because there are restrictions in other parts of the city that now, in view of the new restrictions on Park Hill, should maybe be considered. If maybe they should be lifted, or maybe they should be reviewed to see if that's the best distribution for our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks. My name is Giuseppe Cimino. I have lived at 303 Hilltop Road in Ward 5 since 1989. I want to express my thanks to the Deputy City Manager for the excellent work done in preparing the background information and draft resolution. The volume of rush hour non-local traffic is clear. With the expected implementation of the county's restrictions, the city must also act to maintain a livable, safe community for its residents. Failure to act will ensure that the non-local rush hour commuter traffic that currently travels on Sligo Creek Parkway will flow directly up Hilltop Road, and upon entering the county's encountering the county's restrictions, have no place to go but up Mississippi Avenue. During the peak morning hour, the traffic from Sligo Creek Parkway onto Hilltop Road is almost half as much as that on Philadelphia Avenue. I urge the City Council to adopt the draft resolution which calls to fully implement all study-recommended traffic restrictions for the benefit of the city residents in Wards 4 and 5. The draft resolution also understands that rush hour traffic restrictions are necessary but not sufficient to meet the goal of the City Council to create a livable and safe community. The draft resolution expands upon the traffic restrictions to request numerous traffic calming and pedestrian safety measures, not only for the directly affected areas, but also to ensure pedestrian safety in neighboring streets, including Maple Avenue. In short, the draft resolution represents a thoughtful way forward for the city and deserves the support of the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'd like to clarify something that I was saying before. I really would not like to see the traffic restriction signs at Ritchie Avenue and Maple Avenue unless and until it's proven that we need that. But I also forgot something. I also, in support of the Ritchie Avenue, of managing the traffic along Ritchie Avenue, I'm also proposing a local traffic only sign be placed at the top of Ritchie at Piney Ranch.
In the afternoon.
Pardon?
In the afternoon.
In the afternoons, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Sherry Willis, and I live at 121 Ritchie Avenue in Tacoma Park. I see, at least speaking for myself, we've moved from the young activists to the middle-aged activists. But speaking only for myself, exactly. I'm here tonight not only as a resident of Ritchie Avenue and Ward 4, but as the secretary of the Ritchie Citizens Association. As you know, within the next few months, these restrictions will go into effect in the county. And we will see an increase in traffic, not only in Ritchie Avenue, but also on Maple Avenue. If the City Council does nothing, our neighborhood will see a severe deterioration in our safety and our quality of life. But more than just our neighborhood will be affected, because many other people walk and bike and ride scooters and drive on Ritchie Avenue. With increased traffic, the children who attend the child care center on Geneva Avenue will be at greater risk. Pedestrians on Maple Avenue between Sligo Creek Parkway and Ritchie Avenue will be at greater risk because of the curve on Ritchie, which has seen at least 3 speeding vehicles leave the roadway in recent years. Pedestrians walking from Maple to Piney Branch and vice versa will be at greater risk. And because of the confusing and dangerous intersection at Oswego and Ritchie, which Ms. Jones mentioned, the many people who walk or ride bikes or scooters to Hefner Park and Community Center will also be at greater risk. There are 2 possible solutions on the table tonight. Both seek to keep commuters on Sligo Creek Parkway, which functions as an arterial road, and which has an intersection at Piney Branch Road, which was actually reconfigured to handle greater traffic. RCA has reached out to our neighbors, including our neighbors on Maple Avenue, who proposed one of the solutions mentioned tonight, and to other community leaders who have been helpful in putting forth possible remedies. We do not seek a gated community any more than the Tacoma Park residents of other streets with traffic restrictions have done. Instead, we are appealing to the City Council for fair and reasonable actions to keep safety on Maple, Ritchie, Hilltop, Mississippi, and other Tacoma Park streets from seriously deteriorating. We have suggested a number of measures to reduce speed on Ritchie and Maple, some of which would cost little but would enhance pedestrian safety. We who live on these streets and use these streets understand that many people will be negatively affected by the county's decision to restrict traffic in Sligo Park Hills. However, we feel it is unfair to ask Ritchie Avenue to bear the entire burden of that decision. In the name of safety and of fairness, we ask the City Council to make our city safer and protect us from the negative effects of the county's decision by enacting one of the solutions before you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Susan Wood. I live at 39 Oswego Avenue. And I wanted to make 2 separate and different points tonight. One is the focus on monitoring. There's several proposals on the table and probably others that may come up, but I think one thing that's very important to take into consideration in any resolution that you have, which is that if there are temporary restrictions put up either on Ritchie or at Maple, and then they're taken down for after any other mitigating actions have been taken, it's really important to have basically a fail-safe, that if the traffic restrictions, or rather if the traffic levels increase to, say, we're already at 100, almost twice the level of traffic at peak times that the county would have allowed restrictions for, that if it were to increase significant, let's say another 20% or 30%, that automatically traffic restrictions would come back up, because I think it's very important that the neighborhoods that have been talking about this have said we're willing to talk about temporary restrictions because we really do want a solution, but we don't want them to be taken down with some assumption without monitoring afterwards. And whether that's done by residents or done by an official study, we're happy certainly to help in any way we can. The second point I wanted to make, and I think it's come out in a couple people's testimony tonight, which is, that we don't want to be a gated community. And I think that's come about because we've been accused by our neighbors in Tacoma Park that somehow Ritchie Avenue, Geneva Avenue, Oswego Avenue think of themselves as an elitist part of Tacoma Park. And I don't think that's fair. And it's not fair for a lot of reasons. Now, I've only lived on Oswego Avenue for 10 years, so I'm a relative newcomer. And so when people say you just, and I probably should stay off the listservs because that's what really gets my blood boiling. I shouldn't read those things. But anyway, in reading them, I get really upset that people would say, we just want to gentrify our neighborhood to raise our property values, and that we only want to be exclusive and elitist in our neighborhood on Ritchie Avenue and Oswego and Geneva. And for those of you who know the history of this town and the history of our neighborhood, know that that's not the case. Our residents, we have a lot of residents who've lived there and some of them are here tonight, who've lived there for decades. Actually, Joyce Siemens is there for her whole life, but there are others as well. A good proportion of our neighborhood has lived there from the year dot. Many of them are children and grandchildren of the original residents of that neighborhood, and they know the history of that neighborhood and the history of how Public Works was brought to that neighborhood and the history of why we should be especially cognizant of the fact that that our neighborhood is actually very diverse and has very proud of its history, but is not trying to gate itself against the rest of Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Christopher King. I live off Maple Avenue. And what I like to do is put this conversation in the proper context. We talk about traffic calming measures. We talk about counting the number of vehicles driving up and down streets. But my concern is safety. Safety. I'm concerned about if someone, child or person gets hit on Ritchie Avenue or Hilltop. I'm just as concerned as I would be there on Maple. If you look at Tacoma Park, every street that touches Maple Avenue, including the top of Maple Avenue, has traffic calming measures already in place. There's speed bumps on every street that touch Maple Avenue, with the exception of the area where most of the apartments are. Why is that? I'm not going to focus on that tonight. What I do want to focus on is we talk about Tacoma Park being a community of activists. A lady here spoke of, we had young activists here earlier. She talked about this as an older activist. Are we only activists when it's convenient? Is our activism conditional? Do we lose sight of the fact that it's a safety issue? You don't solve safety by closing your street off and leaving the streets that are unclosed to deal with the fact that people are speeding. This is a community-wide problem. It needs a community-wide solution. The community-wide solution that I propose is right turn only coming from Sligo Creek Parkway, coming from New Hampshire Avenue onto Maple. That way, Ritchie Avenue is not affected by additional traffic. Hilltop and Mississippi Avenue are not affected. And we route all the traffic back down Sligo Creek Parkway. That is my solution. And I'd like to close with a quote. We must recognize the full human equality of all people before God, before the law, and in the councils of government. We must do this not because it's economically advantageous, although it is. Not because the laws of God and man command it, although they do command it. Not because in other lands wish it so. We must do this for the single and fundamental reason that it is the right thing to do. Bobby Kennedy, thank you.
Thank
you. Good evening. First, I'd like to recognize This is such a wonderful community space. Thank you to the council and thank you to the city management for making this happen. It's wonderful. It's nice to see you and nice to see the community in such an elegant room. Councilor Simmons, thank you for recognizing my guest. My guest is a businessman. He's here on a business and personal trip. And I'm so proud of Takoma Park, and I want to work hard to make the community vital and connected with other places like Ethiopia through cultural and economical engagement. In that context, I'd like to show off Takoma Park, how we work. And in fact, he was so fascinated earlier, he was telling me, seeing the democracy at work. I'm also going to drive him around and see what potentials that we have and a couple of projects that I've disclosed to some of you. Okay, that said, in the strongest possible term, I oppose any restriction whatsoever. I don't care if it's a council, I don't care if it is a county, for two basic reasons. Number one, it's totally unsafe. Unsafe. It does not address the safety concern that we have as a city. It addresses the safety concern that some folks have in some places. This is not just, it is unjust. In fact, on this case, 5% of your population, citizens and residents in Takoma Park live on Maple Avenue apartments. 1,000 people live on that corridor. It ignores, in fact, they're not even here. It ignores, they don't even know, they're busy working. And it's unjust on two levels. Number one, it limits their access to public road. It's going to limit my movement. In the morning, my little girl, Helena, is going to be going to Piney Ranch Elementary School. And my son, Yared, is going to be going to the middle school. Now, this restriction imposed is going to level my concern about my little girl who wishes to walk to home from school because of the traffic increase on Maple Street. It is not a safety issue. It does not address the total citywide safety issue. So it's unsafe in any way you cut it, in any way you look at it, unless you come up with other measures that addresses the traffic issue, which is really, really bad in every corner of our city. And then it is unjust. You know why it's unjust? Not only it asks me to limit my access, it limits my access to the public road, it also asks me to drive longer, pay more gas mileage because it's going to take longer for me. So my privilege is taken, and I'm supposed to subsidize it by driving long, time and money. That is unfair. You're limiting my access to public road, and you're asking me to pay for it, to address others in it. This, to me, in principle, is unacceptable. You can do whatever you please, and the strongest voice, I would say, I'd like to go on the record. I'm sorry, I oppose the restriction. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
That's another tough act to follow. All right, Kay Daniels, Cohen, Ward 3, Sherman Avenue, President, SS Carroll Neighborhood Association. First, wow, fantastic, beautiful new digs here. Great podium, easy to hide behind, not like the Azalea Room. I like this. First, I understand that there are no easy answers to any of these traffic issues. But I'm also concerned that without the county's suggested no-through traffic sign at Mississippi and Sligo Creek Parkway, that the Sligo Park Hills traffic will end up at Geneva and on to Ritchie. And what might solve that traffic issue would be during rush hours to and from a no right turn onto Ritchie and a no left turn, and I think also something on the Piney Branch side. My concern about the possibility of putting a no left turn sign during rush hours at Maple Avenue and Sligo Creek Parkway will cause the Sligo Creek Parkway traffic to turn left on Carroll Avenue Extended and right either on Lincoln, Sherman, and possibly Lee Avenues to get down to Maple and cut through. And I'm sure everybody doesn't agree with me there, but that's how I see it, and possibly Lee. We already have a lot of cut-through traffic coming through close to, Sherman Avenue has close to as much cut-through traffic per hour as the county allows. Not quite, but close to during rush hours. This is my question for you. Is it possible to study the lights at the junction and come up to a solution so that there isn't such a jam there. There has to be a way to sequence those lights. There has to be a way to sequence those lights so that there's not such a hideous traffic jam, and people will, instead of trying to cut through the neighborhoods, will go ahead and go on the main 410 highway, or at least make it a shorter wait. And I ask you to consider all the options that you have in front of you very carefully, because it will impact not only Ritchie and Mississippi and Hilltop, Geneva and Oswego, but also those other cut-throughs. I don't think anyone's even thought about the Lincoln, Sherman, and Lee Avenue cut-throughs as well. I thank you for your time. I thank you all for what you do, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come and speak in front of you and in front of the city itself. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Anybody else in public comment?
My name is Kitty Tucker. I live on Kennebec Avenue. Until recently, I considered the people on Park Valley Road my neighbors. Now I discover that I have been eliminated from the pool of people considered commuters over this particular roadway that is 2 blocks from my home and has been a major access route to my home since we moved in 1982. I do not think that public tax dollars should be used to create private drives for single-family homes. We have more speed humps on roads on streets along single-family homes than we do along the streets with schools. We have more stop signs on Maple, but on the hill of Maple we have both the old type and the new type of speed humps. When I was in heart failure in the mid-1990s, every speed hump, no matter how slowly my husband drove, was painful. I imagine that people who suffer from similar health issues also find speed bumps a painful method of control. I believe that the City Council should say, hey, we need to take another look at what's been authorized at the county level, and I would urge, number one, the City Council advertise far more widely public hearings on proposals to turn public roadways into private drives, either during rush hour or not. I secondly would urge the City Council to pass a resolution to appeal the decision of the County Council to shut off this roadway that should be available to we, the taxpayers. The people who live along this roadway knew that this roadway was a 2-lane road when they bought their homes. Now, they tend to park in the roadway, and it's become sort of a one-lane road. In the evenings, it's very difficult to see the speed humps because the white tapes come off when it gets hot and when it gets cold. And so the road itself is a very sort of treacherous road, and we move on that road very slowly as it is. I don't see the need to shut off roadways and turn them into personal drives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Barnes of Maple. Actually, I'm right at the intersection of Maple and Maplewood, if that helps you understand where I am. And I'm the father of a 1-year-old and 3-year-old girl. I have 2 things I'd like to express, and I recognize that this quorum does not have all the power to make all the changes I'd like, but in the last couple of months with the diversion of traffic on Sligo Creek, I've come to see some of the impact of what traffic diversions do. Our street was turned from our street, Maple and Maplewood, were both turned from essentially residential roads into thoroughfares. It doesn't take a genius to understand that when you put a rock in a river, the water flows faster around the edges, and that's exactly what I fear is going to happen here. Again, I recognize that's not entirely in your hands, but I first of all wanted to express my deep concern that this is going to set us up for a very big problem when my daughters are teenagers and maybe playing in those roads. I take that literally as my own life out there at risk. The other thing I'd like to express, frankly, is that I was not a Tacoma Park person when I was born, and not when I went to university, and not even in my first part of my career, but I married a Tacoma Park person. And when she brought me here, it was with a very distinct understanding of what that meant. And I've got to honestly say, I'm very disappointed at the way this has played out and the way it's driven one set of neighbors to seek out really a preference. And it is directly at my expense, and my family's expense, and my neighbor's expense. So I want to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment?
Good evening. My name is Milka Tokic. I live on Ritchie Avenue, and I've been there for 23 years. It offends me that people are trying to say we're trying to make that the gated community. When I moved there, it looked nothing like it does today, and I plan on being there because I just learned to love it. We're here only because there are other restrictions on other streets, and that's all we try to do. And we're also trying to make it so that if this does not increase the traffic, we're going to lift all of them. And yes, the safety issue is first. We're concerned about everybody's children. One of the suggestions we had as an association that we put that no left turn on Maple sign. I don't know what the solution is, except maybe that we all have to drive less. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen Crane. I live at 141 Ritchie Avenue for the last 23 years. Good evening, and thank you all for having this forum. I'm amused at the idea that we're seeking preference or that we're elitist on Ritchie Avenue and the surrounding areas. About 15 years ago, people were hitting third gear on Ritchie about 50 miles an hour before they hit the turn. That was when our neighbors got together and finally asked for speed humps in our neighborhood. It wasn't that we didn't want the traffic. It was that our elderly, our children, and our animals were in danger of being mowed down on a daily basis. We're not elitists. We don't want restrictions. We don't see options because we are not in a position to create a traffic plan for Tacoma Park writ large that will address the problems of too much traffic on small streets going in too many directions at rush hours. The restrictions aren't the optimal choice. We agree. We need a plan that serves all of Tacoma Park. In the meantime, we'd like not to have our elders, our children, and our animals mowed down by inordinate amounts of traffic on our not very elitist streets. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
My name is Hank Prensky from 7921 Sligo Creek Parkway. I don't even want to comment on the issue on the table in terms of Ritchie Avenue and Geneva Avenue and proposed restrictions because I think that's a red herring. I think the problem is that somehow the county's process got so narrowed down and so constricted that it allowed the creation of a problem in Sligo Park Hills that now affects my neighbors on Ritchie and Geneva Avenue. And it affects me because I live in a part of town where coming and going to my home requires me to go across those streets, either Ritchie or Geneva or Park Valley, the whole slew of closed-off streets. There's something wrong with the process that did not take me into account and never notified me, who lives on Sligo Creek Parkway, of these potential closings until the sign went up on Sligo Creek Parkway 2 years into the process. There's something wrong if our county council representatives, Mr. Elrich and Mr. Leventhal, can't find some way to reopen this process and include not only the neighbors who petitioned from Sligo Park Hills, but the neighbors who are affected by those changes. I think Jim put it beautifully when he said, any fool knows when you drop a big rock in the stream, the water flows faster around the edges. And that's the problem of what we have on Ritchie Avenue and the adjoining streets. The constriction, the restrictions on Sligo Park Hills are creating bigger problems for us. We're a community of people with cars and streets. We have to find a solution that does not restrict some people at the expense of others, but enforces the laws and finds ways to slow down the traffic, to prevent the unsafe situations, but doesn't take away people's access to the public roads. I encourage you to work with your county council representatives, with Mr. Leggett, the county executive, and find a solution that incorporates all the needs of all those people from all those closing off streets. This is not a way to run a community.
Thank you. One last chance. Anybody for public comment? Okay, then we will move along to the city manager's comments.
I will be very brief. Just wanted to let the council know that last week interviews were conducted with the general contractors for the Public Works facility. I spoke to the mayor earlier today, and given the magnitude of the project and the expense involved, suggested to the mayor that we have a work session prior to bringing forward any ordinance, so we can discuss the results of the bid process and make some decisions before we bring that forward to you all. The only other item I have is just to let the council know that I did meet with the representative from FEMA last week and did sign off on the paperwork for reimbursement from the December storm. The process is now open for recovery of costs for the February storm, and we're working on that at this time.
And approximately how much is involved in those?
It's a 75% reimbursement. For the December storm, if they accept everything that we have filed, we would get about $40,000 back. And we're still compiling cost for the February storms.
And I assume that would be more?
Much more. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. I think we'll try and do the remaining regular meeting items and then take a break. So we'll move to agenda item 2, which is the first reading ordinance authorizing FY10 budget amendment number 3. And did the city manager want to speak a little bit about that first?
I will try to be brief. The items that were addressed in this budget amendment are laid out in some detail in the agenda packet. There would be 3 funds that would be impacted, and I'll just touch briefly on the changes in each of those funds. The Special Revenue Fund, which is, as the council knows, the mechanism we use to track grant-funded projects, would be changed in several ways. We had community development block grant funds in the budget were allocated both for a commercial facade program and the Holton Lane Streetscape project. It became very apparent that we were not going to expend all the funds by the deadline for the commercial facade program. We had some applicants who had withdrawn their proposals. Ms. Daines, the Director of Housing and Community Development, approached me, given the clock was ticking, about possibly allocating some of those funds to the Holton Lane Streetscape project. So the budget amendment that's before the council would essentially move those funds between those 2 projects. As the council is aware, we had used a considerable amount of cable funds for the renovation of the auditorium. We were relying heavily on our audiovisual consultant for that project. Those costs ended up being more than we had anticipated. So the budget amendment would just basically allocate those funds to the appropriate account in the Special Revenue Fund. On the revenue and the expenditure side, we were awarded a small grant, $1,000 from the Maryland State Arts Council, which was not anticipated at the time the budget was adopted, so the budget amendment would recognize that $1,000 on both the revenue and the expenditure side in the Special Revenue Fund. Kind of going quickly through the general fund changes. The Park Avenue parking lot project, which I believe everyone on the council is familiar with, that was originally accounted for as a capital project. Given the nature of the project and its location, not on public property, the finance director has recommended that those expenditures be moved from the capital account to the Housing and Community Development operating budget. So that's simply a transfer between two different budgetary units. The other changes have to do with some changes in some projects. The Public Works facility renovation, as the council is aware, was sort of deliberately slowed down because of the problems in the municipal bond market. The budget, as adopted, assumed that the project would be completed by June 30th. Obviously, that's not going to happen since we haven't even awarded a general contractor contract. So just to avoid a huge year-end budget variance, we would just basically take the expenditures down in the capital account that were allocated for the Public Works facility renovation. For the actual construction, the budget had also anticipated that we would issue $1.5 million in general obligation bonds. That's obviously not going to happen either. So this budget would essentially delete the funding for the Public Works facility bonds. I would just mention as an aside that because that's not going to occur, we will be bringing forward an amendment at the appropriate time for the fiscal year 11 budget for the bond proceeds. Another general obligation bond issue change has to do with the deficit that we paid off with the State of Maryland retirement system. That was done with the council's approval earlier this year. The budget amendment would simply recognize the receipt of those bond proceeds as well as the payoff that was made to the state with the council's concurrence back in April. With the delay in the Public Works facility project, the Public Works Director and I agreed that it was probably not the best time to be buying even more equipment that we'd have to figure out how to store, so we will be delaying the purchase of the asphalt miller paver. The budget amendment would simply delete the $105,000 that it was in the budget for that capital expenditure. And the last change has to do with the speed camera fund. The council is aware that there were some changes made by state legislature that went into effect in the fall. We've been sort of tracking what was happening with fines for the speed camera fund. The budget amendment that is before the council this evening would just recognize that we did see a significant drop-off in the number of citations that were issued through that program and would decrease both revenues in the speed camera fund as well as the associated payment that we make to the program contractor.
Two quick questions on those items. On the last one, on the speed cameras, can you characterize how much of that might be as a result of the construction work going on New Hampshire Avenue?
That is certainly a contributing factor as well. I don't know if we have a good sense, Mayor, of how much is attributable to the construction versus the change in the speed limit that constitutes a violation. I think more of the drop-off is probably attributable to the change in state law, but certainly the construction has had an impact as well.
Okay. And the other one, if you can just say a little bit more about the audio-video money. My recollection is that that money is a dedicated funding source that can only be used for capital equipment items for associated with cable TV and audio-video operations.
That is correct. It is restricted in its use by the cable franchise agreement, and it is not available for the city's general operations. It can only be used for capital or other types of technical work.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Robinson.
I commend you for balancing all these fiscal balls and getting it straight. The only thing I really have to say is that although we authorized and I voted for the authorization for the pension system allocation, I think that we have to find a way away from that defined benefits. And this coming year, I'd like to see an analysis and even develop plans to move away from that model in a way that does no harm to our staff, if at all possible, and in whatever creative ways we can pull that off. But it's a belt-tightening time. This is $1.5 million in 1 year, although I know it covers a broader period of time, but that is a huge expenditure which we cannot afford into the future, particularly if our economy continues to go downhill, which it may well do. So that's what I have to say about that.
Would somebody like to move this ordinance?
Move it. Second.
I think that was moved by Councilmember Schultz, seconded by Councilmember Snipper. Any further council discussion? Any public comment on this first reading budget amendment ordinance? Seeing none, all those in favor of this budget amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. We no longer have a consent agenda, so we will do the item that remained on what would have been the consent agenda first, then we'll take the item removed from it. So we're looking at item 3B, which is resolution providing for an appointment to the Facade Advisory Board. Would somebody like to move that?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Wright, second by Councilmember Snipper. Any discussion on that? Any public comment? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now moving to the single reading ordinance authorizing purchase of a replacement van for the Recreation Department. Councilmember Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor. The community center, when it was built, was envisioned to be a vibrant resource for vibrant community programs, to bring, have a place for young people to come and many different programs, both educational and recreational. And to some degree, we have been able to do that. But I wanted, as we think about going out and purchasing a replacement van, I wanted to take a step back and look for a minute at how we use the van. And I see that some of the use of the van is to bring people to recreational programs at city facilities, but a great deal of the use of the van is to transport people outside of the city to recreational activities. But at the same time, I see many of the young people in wards around the city, and I think of Ward 5 in particular, that is significant distance from the community center and also a significant distance from the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center, that don't really participate in the recreational programs very often. And I would like to see us using the van and the city bus to transport the young people to our facilities so that they're being more greatly used, and that the money for the use of the van be spent on increasing the usage of our recreational facilities, because we can serve a great many more young people by transporting them to our recreational facilities in the city than we can by transporting them to events outside of the city. I would just also like to say that we have talked at recent budget hearings about the community center being open here without many people being in here using the recreation facility. And again, I think I support the purchase of this van to replace our existing van, but again, I think it would behoove us to use the van to bring the young people to programs, and having those programs here at the community center in the evenings when we are not seeing programs and not seeing the usage of the community center. Thank you.
Councilmember Robinson.
I look forward also to extending that discussion of what to do with vans as regards our kids. If we're going to bring kids out of the city limits, to think about what benefits them the most. It might be recreation. I've talked with a couple of people over the past week who said getting people out to learn farming, for example, would be a very good way to engage kids, make them realize that there's a world outside Tacoma Park. And I sense that that's the reason that the Recreation Department gets kids outside of Tacoma Park is to make sure they see there's something outside. But if it's to take them to King's Dominion or something like that, it doesn't ring my bell. So in addition to the conversation about whether kids should be brought outside or not, I'd like to talk about if they're taken outside the city limits, for what purpose.
Any other comments? I don't see it. There you go, Councilmember Clay.
I was hoping that Councilmember Siemens would elaborate a little bit more on the comment about taking people from outside of the city to other places outside of the city.
I may have misspoke. I meant people inside the city to places outside.
Just
So
checking.
taking city
What if we were
residents.
just moving people around in the county? It's not part of our services. Stir the pot.
Thank you for catching that faux pas.
I would, is the Recreation Department going to speak at this at all? Because what I would hazard to guess, they would say, is that the process for getting a license to drive the 15-passenger van is possibly less onerous than the process for getting a license to drive the 22 or 25-passenger van. So that's my first guess at maybe why they're interested in the van. However, and I understand that. It would be a lot easier to be supportive of buying the van if they were already finding a way to use the large bus van that we have, and I would support training the people in the Recreation Department to drive that vehicle. It's not that bad. I drove a motorhome when I was a kid. My dad taught me how to back up the motorhome when I was like 16, as soon as I got my driver's license. And it's about like driving one of those big buses. You can do it, I know. So I would like to hear from the Recreation Department, why specifically this van, and is this a van that's going to be used after they've used the shuttle bus or instead of the shuttle bus, which is what I fear is happening now.
First of all, good evening to everyone. And yes, you are correct. The 15-passenger van does not require a commercial driver's license in order to drive the vehicle. That means more staff can be trained in driving the vehicle and to bring kids here to the community center. Right now, the current van that we have is used to transport kids from the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center, all places across the city, down to the community center for Yes League activities, for man-up activities, and other activities that we have in our department currently. We also do have outside trips that we take. Those trips are educational trips, as well as some fun things for the kids to do as well. So we plan on doing both and continuing to provide educational as well as other leisure opportunities for these young people using this vehicle.
We're losing your audio.
He's just dropping off.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, we do plan on using this vehicle to transport kids here to the community center. Right now, this 15-passenger van, you do not need a commercial driver's license in order to operate this vehicle. And I have driven the van around the block up to Public Works, the actual 24-passenger right now. But I can't transport people on that vehicle because I don't possess that license. But this current van, we have more staff that can be trained through the normal defensive driving process, some in-house training that we can do, and all of our staff who are eligible can drive that van and transport kids to and from the community center for various activities that we have. Right now, we use the old van that we do have. We transport kids to the Yes League, kids from the Recreation Center, to other activities that we have. And we also do transport them to educational trips as well as leisure trips that we have throughout the course of the year.
Councilmember Clay?
Is there a plan to train full-time staff, or even part-time staff, but I would assume you'd want to invest first in your full-time staff, to learn to drive the 24-passenger shuttle bus If so, what is that plan? If not, when will we see a plan?
Currently, we do have one part-time staff member that does have a commercial driver's license that actually recently got his commercial driver's license, and we plan to begin to use him actually within the next couple of weeks because he just received the license. So we'll take him on his trial run, and he'll begin to get in the rotation, and we don't have to go out and get private contractors in order to drive that vehicle.
But why private contractors? Why can't you train your staff to drive that vehicle?
He said he is going to.
No, he said we're going to go out and get private contractors to drive that vehicle.
We have a staff person that now is in possession of a commercial driver's license.
How many permanent staff members do you have in the recreation
We have
department?
none that is in possession of a commercial driver's license.
How many permanent staff members do you have in the recreation department?
At the moment, 9.
How come half of them or 4 of them are the ones that frequently work with the kids or the ones that would be available to do this kind of work as part of their job don't get trained in this 24-passenger license? Is it too expensive? How come we haven't trained those people?
Well, there is a cost associated with obtaining a commercial driver's license. I have to look into the amount, but I do know there's an extensive training process, somewhere in the range of 16 weeks of training that you have to go to, but it's an extensive training process that you have to go through. And there's a test required as well in order to get that license.
So it's like getting a license to drive a bus? Like one of the double articulated buses takes that much?
Yes, that's what type of license you get.
Okay, so
Yes.
Next Maryland legislative activity, split out in the licensing for commercial licensed vehicles, smaller motorhome-sized buses that are used for this kind of transportation.
Or sell the bus.
Because you want me to, have a heart attack and die on the floor in front of you? No, learn to drive the bus.
And just a reminder that I believe I'm correct in saying that when the Recreation Department recommended getting a larger bus, it was for a slightly smaller bus that wouldn't have required a commercial driver's license, and the council said, no, we want it to be the bigger one.
Right.
And never mind that it requires the CDL, we think a bigger one is better. So that's not necessarily what they wanted. So, Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with your recollection, the discussion, and we talked about a smaller van that didn't require the license at the time we bought the bus, and the council at that time said, yes, but we do want the bus because we do want to transport people to the community center and to the recreation center so that they're well-used, and that the recreation department told us of the additional cost, and the council affirmed that we wanted that money spent so that we would have a driver. People have asked me, especially after this last budget hearing, of why I'm so critical of the recreation department. I didn't feel that making budget suggestions was being critical, but this is one area that has been extremely frustrating to me, that we purchased a resource for the recreation department that has not been utilized to bring people to the community center, the young people to the community center, and to the other recreational programs within the city limits. So I think we've said enough. I compliment you, and I appreciate that the recreation department now has someone who is licensed to be able to drive the bus. I think the council made the right decision a while ago, and I'm optimistic that we will be doing a lot more outreach so that we can serve more of the young people in this city. Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
To me, it's kind of two separate issues. The replacement van is a safety issue from reading the briefing packet, and we should go ahead and replace that van with this Prodigy LP so it can transport people here and there, to simplify. The issue with the bus, I would ask a question of Greg. Did we ask or pay for the training for that staff person that now has the license, or did they already have it, or did they just go get it on their own?
No, we didn't currently, we didn't ask or pay for the training. The staff person had a conversation with one of our staff persons that he was getting the training and he was interested in driving the bus. He was encouraged to do so. He actually got trained through his church, but with the intent of driving for his church as well as driving for the city.
Okay. So it's not, it actually doesn't sound like it was a set plan to do that. It so happened that it occurred. It seems to me that we should either, as Colleen says, train some staff members to be able to drive the bus. I've been on the council now getting close to 3 years, and this issue comes up again and again. If we had just trained the people 3 years ago or started 3 years ago, we'd have a bunch of people trained. Or we should get rid of that bus and get one of these Prodigy LP buses that holds 16 passengers. It's 7 less people. Sure, you wouldn't be able to use it as or haul as many people, but I imagine that the limited use of that 23-passenger bus would better be served by a 16-passenger one that we could use all the time. And I'd also be curious, how often is it that we're actually using the 23-passenger bus and using it below capacity? So maybe the 16-passenger bus would serve anyway. But I kind of am just sick of having this conversation, and I wish this solution would just be solved one way or the other.
Look to Mr. Clark to help me out here on a couple points. I think one thing is obviously these staff members also have other job functions, so anytime they're spent driving, they are not performing those job functions. I think we also need to look at what we pay the driver to actually operate the bus who already has a license versus what you would pay for some of the staff, their hourly rate plus all the benefits and things of that nature. I believe in regard to the differences between the two vehicles, and Mr. Clark can please correct me if I'm mistaken, I don't believe the van that is on the council's agenda this evening basically is ADA accessible or has any type of lift. Is that correct?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
So let me say that I agree with Councilmember Siemens' original reason for wanting to take this off the consent agenda and talk about it, because I think that it is a good conversation to have, to talk about the use of city resources with buses and how we either use them to take people to other things away from the city or to bring people from around the city to city facilities to use them. I'm not sure of the best way of dealing with the need for a commercial driver's license, whether the best answer is to get a different type of bus for the current 23-passenger bus. Maybe there's a way to do a bus that doesn't require a CDL, but that has the ADA access. And I think that the point that the city manager made about whether it's our full-time staff who drive the bus versus having somebody else or a group of people available to do so is the best way to go in terms of program and cost. But I think the frustration that the council feels about how this whole bus transportation issue gets resolved is an ongoing one, and I look forward to better resolution to this. But I think we need to
I'd
go
like
ahead
to
and
move the
approve this
resolution.
purchase.
I'd like to move the resolution.
Do we get there?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Siemens, seconded by Councilmember Schultz. Councilmember Clay.
So I'm looking at the Maryland commercial driver's license classes. So you have a driver's license to drive your car, and then there's commercial driver's license. Class C license, the threshold is that it is designed to transport 16 or more passengers, including the driver. So there isn't a drop-down that we could do with the bus that would make a difference. If we went to a 22-passenger bus or an 18-passenger bus, you'd still have to have the exact same commercial driver's license. So selling the shuttle bus and buying a smaller shuttle bus or the shuttle bus that they originally were looking for doesn't resolve the issue at hand. And the last comment that I would make is that is actually towards the city manager's comment, which is that if you have to use contractors or special additional employees whose job is only to drive the bus and they don't do kid engagement activities, that's part of what drives up the cost. But if you train your staff members to drive the bus, then you have, when you go out to your tremendous trip or your farm that you're taking the people to, when they get there, your person who drives the bus is also a recreation trained, it's a recreation staff person that's there as an additional staff person to engage the kids, whereas the contractor model that we have been using has the driver sitting the entire time that the kids are out engaged in the activity, and they're on the payroll that entire time. And so the solution is to train the recreation department staff to drive the bus.
I think it's a mixture of the various models, because there's also times when you don't want to have the recreation department staff not available to do other things because they have to drive the bus. So I can see where there would be a mixture.
I think you always take 2 staff members. On a trip where you have 16 kids, I would hope you always take 2 staff members. Most rec programs, 10 is the threshold for adding an additional staff member anyway.
Okay. What we're voting on is purchase of a bus. Is there any other council comment? Is there any public comment?
Sorry to delay.
Welcome.
I just wanted to take a moment. I'm definitely in support of replacing the bus. Helpful information to know. It doesn't really matter in terms of the license required for 16 up to 22. You still have to get the commercial driver's license. But what I wanted to address was the use of the bus. Taking kids out of the city, even to Kings Dominion, is important for people who have very limited access that you might not have. It provides recreation. I mean, they're not going to Kings Dominion, but probably one time a year. But I do think that there are a variety of things in our metropolitan area that are good, educational, fun things for kids and adults to do, such as whitewater rafting in the Shenandoah, or even Kings Dominion when you're 6 or 16. And I also wanted to address use of the van to bring people here in the evenings. I think it's or any other time of the day. I think that that's very important. And I just remember signing my daughter up for some activities. I wanted her to play on a soccer team. She did the soccer clinic because it was right after school, but I'm a single parent and I could not leave work early enough to come back here to drive her to the soccer practices. But it would be nice if there was a recreation bus that swung by the schools to pick up the kids who were going to go to soccer practice, and then maybe drop them, or the parents could pick them up here at the community center in the evening after they got off from work. So anyway, I want to support that.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. All those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Mayor Williams, should we do a roll call on this?
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry.
Okay, Mayor Williams.
Aye.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye again.
Councilmember Sniffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Schultz.
Aye.
Okay, that carries unanimously. We will now take a short break. We will come back for the final 2 work session items.
My coffee here.
lights. We're now to the discussion of Sligo Park Hills Ritchie Community Traffic Access Restrictions. And the Deputy City Manager is going to start us off.
Thank you. I prepared a fairly comprehensive package, I think, related to the request by the Ritchie Citizens Association to have traffic access restrictions through its neighborhood. This is in large part due to the fact that the Sligo Park Hills neighborhood, which is partially in Tacoma Park, but mostly in Montgomery County, went through the Montgomery County process, period of over, I think, 7, almost 8 years of going through a fairly established process that other communities in Montgomery County can take to request traffic access restrictions to its neighborhood. That process came to kind of the head with a public hearing in February because it affected the Ritchie Citizens Association area and some other areas in the traffic zone that was defined by Park and Planning. We had a combined public hearing with Ritchie Citizens Association and Sligo Park Hills issues both being considered. That public hearing was presided over by Diane Schwartz-Jones, who functioned as the hearing examiner for the county. She works in the county executive's office, and myself kind of representing the city, although we have different processes. The county has a very formalized process. It has standards for the numbers of cars that go through on a street that set a trigger. It has various decision points. The city of Tacoma Park does not have those. We've issued traffic restrictions in a number of places across Tacoma Park without those criteria. That public hearing was held. It was well attended. We had, I think I listed the number of people that commented. We had 38 residents speak at the public hearing of both Montgomery County and Tacoma Park. We had an additional 199 written comments. If you didn't count duplicates, we had 85 people testifying in favor of the proposed restrictions and 122 testifying in opposition to the restrictions. What I did not do is go back through all of the comments to define if I was able to determine if they were related to the Sligo Park Hill request or to the Ritchie Citizens Association request. So just to let you know, I do know that some people had more of an interest in one or the other. The concern, as a result of that public hearing, the hearing examiner was very deliberate in how she reviewed the testimony. She read all of the testimony. She took concerns about the traffic study back to the Department of Transportation in the county and had questions of them, had them check numbers. She requested a field visit. She and I and 2 traffic engineers, Ali Kalilian, and also the boss of the person who worked on Mr. Bulgrade, Khurshid Bulgradi, who worked on the county's transportation portion. The 4 of us went out. We examined the actual roads in both the Sligo Park Hills and Ritchie Citizens Association neighborhoods. We looked at where the signs would be posted if they were approved. We went back and around in a number of times. Then Ms. Jones also asked the Department of Transportation to put in video cameras on Park Valley and a number of other roads in the Sligo Park Hills neighborhood to try to determine the extent of which there was queuing or other problems for the residents. I've included her testimony, her recommendation of decision in the package. It is quite thorough, addressing the issues that were raised by a number of the people who spoke at the public hearing. And her her recommendation to the county executive was the Sligo Park Hills access restrictions be approved.
The county executive approved her recommendation, and the process now goes back to the streets that are directly affected, then petition, one vote per household, to see if that's actually what they want to do, because it would make a difference about how they get into and out of their homes. That process, I believe, is going forward now. The expectation is that the residents would approve. There's a couple interesting facts about the Sligo Park Hills request. Again, some of the streets are within the city of Tacoma Park in the Sligo Park Hills neighborhood, Mississippi, and a portion of Hilltop. The two of the signs that that are to protect the Sligo Park Hills neighborhood would need to be installed within the city of Tacoma Park and city of Tacoma Park right-of-way. If those signs were not installed within the city of Tacoma Park, then the traffic would be diverted onto Hilltop and Mississippi Avenues. With the expected approval of the Sligo Park Hills traffic restrictions, the Ritchie Citizens Association has been very concerned that traffic would come through, be diverted into the Ritchie Citizens Association neighborhood. We don't have a well-defined process for granting traffic restrictions in Tacoma Park. We do have a lot of streets that do have traffic access restrictions in Tacoma Park. Some are closed, some are one-way, some have had hour restrictions. Some of the streets that I know of are Kentland Avenue, Larch Avenue, Ann Street, Lockney Avenue, Manor Circle, Grant Avenue, Park Avenue, Montgomery Avenue, and Old Philadelphia. As has been mentioned, the streets in the Pinecrest neighborhood did have some limited hour turn restrictions for a number of years on Poplar, Sligo Mill Road, and 4th. Those have been removed now. And of course, it's not under the city's control, but Sligo Creek Parkway closes on Sundays for recreational use. Other than Sligo Creek Parkway, none of the traffic restrictions are in wards 4 or 5 in the city of Tacoma Park, but they're in every other ward. A couple things that I think you should be aware of. I did not go back and review the adequacy of the traffic study. That was something that, I didn't have time for, but also we don't have criteria that would say that it meets a certain level and therefore an access restriction should be granted. I reviewed it briefly. But there are a couple of things that I think do merit some concern. Certainly the Ritchie Citizens Association has felt that they've got enough cut-through traffic as it is to be a problem, and they're concerned about additional. We don't have, and so that's something that they have attested to, and you've seen some of their information. There's a couple of things that, if traffic access restrictions were imposed, and it would be difficult a little bit to come up with a sense of what the impacts are over the next year or so because of some construction issues that surround the Ritchie Citizens Association neighborhood. The first is that the Tacoma Park Elementary School has been closed in this area for the year. During that time, school buses have been routed in different ways. More school buses have been here to serve the students and send them to the temporary school. When the school reopens in August, it will reopen functioning in a different way with the bus access off of Philadelphia. And so we are kind of waiting to see what the new patterns will be of bus traffic through the area, and also what new pedestrian traffic will be. And there may be some changes to that. The second thing, as you're aware, is that Sligo Creek Parkway has been closed for some time. It's now been reopened just in the last few days. We're still waiting to see how traffic kind of gets back used to using Sligo Creek Parkway all the way through. One of the complaints that we've received is that not all the ride-on buses know that Sligo Creek Parkway is back open, and that's caused some problems in some neighborhoods. As you know, the Public Works facility is scheduled to be reconstructed over the course of the next year. It's not clear what the extent of the impact of that construction will be on traffic patterns through the neighborhood, whether it will deter people, whether there will be increased construction traffic. There obviously will be some, so we don't know what that impact will be. If traffic calming devices are approved and to be installed, we would want to make sure that it makes sense given the construction patterns. And some of the things may need to wait until after the construction is complete. During the same period, the Tacoma Piney Branch Park will be under construction. This may affect some people and how students perhaps go up to the Tacoma Park Middle School and maybe not be able to go through the park, whether this encourages some people to drive their children to the middle school or to ride their bikes in a different way or something is something to be determined, and we don't know that yet. In your package, I've put in a number of different maps. One is an annotated access restriction map. It's a little bit difficult to follow these maps, and I wanted to provide you with something that kind of is keyed to the proposals, as well as a list of the proposed traffic calming measures submitted by the Ritchie Citizens Association. I did provide a background report with attachments, and one of the things that I think is particularly helpful is kind of the color-coded map that shows how the neighborhoods are, and that indeed Sligo Park Hills does, as a neighborhood, does come into the city limits. The maps that are included that were done as part of the traffic study are incorrect in showing where the city boundary line is. And I want you to be very careful to look at my map on that regard, because that is what makes the difference about where the location of the two signs are that are proposed for Sligo Park Hills that would be in the Tacoma Park, within the city, Tacoma Park city boundaries. I do have a couple different copies of the access restriction map. I have the hearing examiner's report. The combined traffic study report for both Sligo Park Hills and for the Ritchie Citizens Association is online. I did not provide that to you. I did provide a copy of the Montgomery County Code, Section 3169, so you can see what that process is. Also, I've included a draft resolution. The draft resolution I wrote with a number of the bits of information as requested by the Ritchie Citizens Association, identifying the kinds of things that they are requesting. What you decide and discuss today can go into the last or several whereas clauses, or you can change obviously any of the whereas clauses. And therefore, be it resolved section is completely blank, waiting for you to give some direction on that level. Let's see. I think there's a couple things I would just indicate that I recommend. I do recommend that the two signs that are part of the Sligo Park Hills restrictions that would be located in Tacoma Park, I would recommend that those be approved. I think that not putting them in would be a hardship to our neighborhood in Mississippi Avenue and Hilltop. And it would also encourage cut through onto Geneva. So they're actually well located to help reduce the problems.
Which specific signs are you talking about there?
Let's see. I think those are 6 and 7. Yeah. They're signs 6 and 7, and they're close to Hilltop and Geneva.
And while you're looking at that, can you just clarify where the previous study map was wrong, but yours is correct?
Yes. The city line goes straight across from Mississippi, kind of north of Mississippi Avenue, all the way to Sligo Creek, as opposed to jogging
They brought
down.
down the creek to make so that they could say it was their place to put a sign.
Okay, so it just affects
It affects Hilltop
the sign
primarily.
placement on Hilltop?
That's right.
Okay.
The other thing that I would recommend is I do think that the Ritchie Avenue is an appropriate location for traffic calming measures. The wide intersection, especially at Ritchie and Geneva, is kind of a free-for-all, and it does make sense to control how the traffic goes through that area. I do also feel pretty strongly that there should be sidewalks on both sides, and that there may be occasional places for bump outs and that kind of thing that make the traffic flow through the area a reasonable one. I do think there was some comments this evening, which I think is good, about the proposal that was made as a second option, where there's a no, it should be, I've got no right turn, a no left turn onto Maple Avenue from Sligo Creek Parkway. I think that how that affects the neighborhood along Carroll and Jackson, and then goes through the Sherman and Lee and Lincoln Avenues is something that should be discussed, I think, if that's something that you're interested in pursuing. My guess is that most of the neighborhoods don't realize that that's an option that could be pursued. I don't have a strong opinion about whether or not the no access signs should be put on Ritchie Avenue. I think that they have a good point when they talk about not wanting people to get in a bad habit when the access restrictions go in for the Sligo Park Hills neighborhood. I don't know myself if those signs are completely merited. I think that's part of, as we say, we don't have criteria for that. I think it's your discussion and what you hear from the neighborhood and the surrounding neighbors that should give direction on that. That's my introduction.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Susie, for your in-depth summary of this issue. As the council has seen both at the public hearing and here tonight at the public comment session, this is one of our more important discussions on the table, because it affects a lot of people. It has there's a lot of not just information and data involved, but there's also a lot of emotion involved. I think there's a few points I would just like to reiterate because I think they're important. One is that this wasn't something that the Ritchie Avenue neighborhood brought to the table. This is not an issue that was where the neighborhood did not say, gee, we have too much traffic. They're reacting to changes that the county's making in restricting the Sligo Park Hills neighborhood. And in fact, many of the buses, the school buses that Susie talked about, because of the school closing at Tacoma Park Elementary School, have been using Ritchie Avenue for the year. And it's been uncomfortable. People have mentioned it, but there hasn't been any measures taken to stop that. The neighborhood is, part of the community and recognizes as part of the community that we all have to work together. But when the neighborhood heard about the study that was being done in Sligo Park Hills neighborhood, they felt that it was better to not wait for problems to pop up, but to work with the county and seeing how any changes would impact the neighborhood. And so we reached out to the county engineers and worked with the city engineer to see the work they were doing, asked them to include our area in the study so that we could see how it was going to impact Ritchie Avenue and the other Tacoma Park streets adjacent to the Sligo Park Hills. And it's because of anticipating those problems that are going to come up that we have come to the city council with this issue. And I would just like to point out, Susie made a comment about, hasn't really vetted the study as far as what the impact is going to be on Ritchie Avenue. However, I do point out that it was both the county engineers and the city engineer who have come up with that report. So it is the professionals' opinion that the traffic on Ritchie Avenue is going to increase significantly with the implementation of the Sligo Park Hills restrictions. So it's clear that, as Susie said, there are some kinds of restrictions that are going to be necessary, not to block off a neighborhood or a part of the community, but to help to diffuse the effect caused by the county's change, so that it's dispersed across more than just one or two roads. And in fact, Susie mentioned some potential longer-term solutions with traffic calming measures and other things that might preclude the need for any traffic restrictions. But the Sligo Park Hills restrictions are not going to wait until we can do something. Traffic calming measures are going to take much longer to implement. And so what the neighborhood is looking for right now is something to disperse the traffic that's been going through Sligo Park Hills, to disperse it through the other surrounding streets in a way that doesn't overburden just one street. And I'll point out, it's interesting as I listen to people talk, Susie mentioned tonight, and other people have made this observation, that a couple of these signs that the county wants to put up are in Tacoma Park property, and so we really control whether or not those signs go up. And a recommendation was that, we should go ahead and put those up because it would cause an undue burden on Mississippi Avenue and Hilltop if we didn't put those up. And if we do put them up, it's going to cause an undue burden on Ritchie Avenue and Geneva. So I don't understand why we would put them up on Hilltop and not on Ritchie. I think, we're talking about, how do we put up restrictions that help to disperse and diffuse the problem and the traffic across the surrounding streets. It makes no more sense to put up restrictions on Hilltop and Mississippi than it does to put them up on Ritchie. I mean, it's not solving the problem. We have to work together. We have to figure out how to do this. And again, there's concern that, it's going to cause some increase in traffic on Lincoln Avenue or Sherman or Lee. Yeah, and it's going to cause some increased traffic on Ritchie and Hilltop and Geneva. I mean, I think we've got to look for a solution where we can share this increase in volume. And I think the suggestion that was made by Ms. Jones that we restrict left turn onto Maple Avenue is a way that, yes, it's going to increase some traffic, some other streets. It's still going to be increase in traffic going up Ritchie Avenue, but it's going to make it, it's going to reduce the probability that all of the traffic is going to divert from Sligo Park Hills to Ritchie Avenue. So I thank you for putting this on the agenda tonight, Mayor, and I thank my colleagues in advance for all their thought that they have put into this already, and I turn to you for the solutions. I think we have a really good one on the table right here as the proposal, which is no left turn on the Maple Avenue off of Sligo Creek Parkway, and then put in some monitoring of the traffic flow so that we identify if our change has made any, created any problems on any of the streets, Ritchie Avenue or Lincoln or whatever, and that we revisit it and see how we have to tweak things to make it acceptable to all the neighborhoods, and that long-term, we look at traffic calming as a way of really helping to control the traffic flow in a safe and efficient manner.
If I may just make a clarification, the issue that I raised about Lincoln, et cetera, about the no left turn from Sligo Creek Parkway to Maple, was only that that was not something that was part of the public hearing and noticed as part of the public hearing. And so that would be, so my recommendation is that there be greater advertisement of that as a proposal.
I agree.
Okay. A lot of times I let my council colleagues have your say, and I try and do a wrap-up. I think this time I want to jump in next.
Is your light on?
I'll turn it on. There. I come out on this whole process in question feeling pretty strongly that we have to do something. This, as has been pointed out, is we have, if we do nothing, the county process, however flawed or well thought out or well done different people might think, it is the county process. They have gone through it. It's been 7 or 8 years of a process, and I'm loath to kind of say, well, you know, that's all well and good, but gee, there's other ways to address this, and there are other things to do, and so no, let's not do this. Let's look at something else. I think, given the immediacy of the Sligo Park Hills implementation, that I'm sure is going to go forward, that the city needs to do something. I think the first thing we need to do is agree to post the signs that are on city right-of-way that are part of the county's implementation plan. The Sligo Park Hills neighborhood is partly in the city and mostly in the county. I think a lot of what we're about is cross-border issues, whether it be with the District of Columbia, Prince George's County, Montgomery County. An awful lot of what we do is cross-border issues and cooperation or the lack thereof with adjacent jurisdictions. And so I don't want to be in the position of saying in this particular instance, well, because we can do something or not do something that's within our jurisdiction, you know, we'll just do what kind of, you know, what is in our own best interests and ignore that relationship. We don't have that kind of relationship. We don't ask for that kind of relationship when it's in another jurisdiction and we're looking for cooperation. So I think we need to cooperate on that. I noticed that in the study, I believe that was done in 2005, that 2/3 of the vehicles that were measured as going through the study area were from beyond 3/4 of a mile from the study area, which tells me that what the study was measuring was a lot of traffic coming from beyond the city, that it's people who are commuting through. We've talked for a long time about in the city where they're commuted upon, and I think this is a good instance of that. And I think that in looking for whether we go with the first option or the second option in terms of where we would place signs, I think I was at first feeling like, gee, they both had merit, and I could go with either the restriction at the bottom of Ritchie or the restriction for the no left turn onto Maple from Sligo Creek Parkway. The more I thought about it, the more I thought I liked the first option of the proposed restriction onto Ritchie. It's not a hard restriction preventing anybody from going in there. It's a restriction that only prevents the right turn People can go other ways and make a left turn and go through, so it's not a closing off of a street. I think it would be more of a closing off of a street if it were the left turn restriction onto Maple, and I think it would just provide a whole lot bigger effect and a lot harder to deal with possible ancillary issues. I like the fact that Ritchie Citizens Association is supporting starting out with the restriction and then looking to have these other traffic calming measures that can result in removal of the restriction. I think that's the right way to go. I think when you're trying to deal with a change and you want to get people's behavior the way it needs to be right off the bat, that you need something like a restriction rather than just wait and see what to do. Because then by the time you want to go do something else that you're trying to change or affect, people's new patterns are already in effect. So I also agree that there are a lot of other access restrictions in different areas around the city, so that saying, well, you know, we shouldn't do this anywhere, and now's the time to put our foot down and say, no, we're not going to do this anymore, that's just leaving people in the lurch where we haven't done that before. I think in a lot of the instances that the deputy city manager brought up about access restrictions that are in effect in the city, people probably don't even think of them that way, one way or closed off, that there have been various reasons for doing that, and they were in just about all cases safety issues, and that's what this is about. So I like the idea of going into this with the idea that the restriction is going to be removed in the relative short term, and that the neighborhood is supportive of that as long as the other pieces of it are implemented in a way that will make the neighborhood safer. So I think that's what we need to do. And I saw Councilmember Wright's light first.
Thank you. First, I want to say I totally disagree with the county's decision, and I think as many people have said that's kind of what put us into this pickle. I'm opposed in general to the idea of closing off roads. I do view one-way roads a little different than road closures, even for periods of time. But the county has made that decision. I do have a question for the deputy city manager. Is there any appeal process that the city could engage in for that county decision?
I did not see one as part of the code, but I'll ask for that.
Okay. And the second question would be, a former council member, Hank Prensky, suggested that we could lobby some of our county council members. He mentioned George Leventhal and Mark Elrich, two people who live in Tacoma Park, but we also have Valerie Irvin, who represents this district. Do we know of, historically, has the county council ever overruled the decision of the county executive? Because the county council didn't vote to approve this, right? The county executive.
This is an executive regulation in the county code. I don't know if the county council can overturn it. I do know that even recently the county council has identified it as a tool to be used as they implement master plans. The White Flint plan that was cited even in the hearing examiner's report did talk about the use of this tool to make a more livable community, even while the county council was increasing growth, and the county council had cited that. But I don't know. It would be interesting. I'll find out and see if the county council can actually take some of that kind of action.
I'd be curious if they could, and if they actually ever have overruled the... So assume that we can't change anything. That leaves me with little choice but to figure out some way to mitigate the increased traffic that would go along Geneva, Mississippi, and Ritchie Avenue. And I have to say that I am very appreciative of the approach that the Ritchie Citizens Association has taken. Contrary to what sounded like some comments that people wanted no traffic on their street or they wanted to close their street, I've actually heard exactly the opposite in my meetings with the Ritchie Citizens Association, that they realize there's going to be some traffic increase. They just want it to be a proportional share, and that everyone should take on some of that increase. And so, which I think is very reasonable. And the other thing that I heard is that they are not prescriptive about what the exact solution should be. There is one that the hearing examiner suggested. They're not opposed to that, but they're also open to other ideas. So that, to me, seems very reasonable and rational. And if actually the individuals who lived on Parkside, Sunnyside, Hilltop, Park Valley Road, and the other roads that got closed had taken that perspective, we might not be in this situation. And I also very much like the fact that they're open to trying things and monitoring and seeing what happens, not only on their road, but other roads, and sensitive to what it might cause on other roads. So, and I like the idea of, and agree with the mayor, that people's traffic patterns can get set, and we should do something kind of in alignment with when the other signs go in. We could then change later on after we do traffic calming on Ritchie or Geneva and see what the results are there. So I'm inclined to support I guess it's a right turn only sign, really, or no left turn at Sligo Creek, the corner of Maple and Sligo Creek, until the time at which we could have traffic calming in place on Ritchie, Geneva, and Mississippi. And then to take that sign down and see what occurs. At the same time, whatever way we choose to do the monitoring, whether it's through volunteer citizens or hiring someone to count the traffic, I think we should be cognizant and aware that it may increase traffic on roads like Jefferson and Lincoln, Sherman and Lee, and we should be able to, if that seems to become a problem, we should be able to, count the traffic there and see if we should adjust the situation. So that's kind of where I'm at. Again, I appreciate the flexibility of the Ritchie Citizens Association, and I'm totally open to other ideas that people may have to try and mitigate the increased traffic flow. And again, when I've talked to them, they're willing to take some increased traffic flow, and they probably will, even if we put in a sign at Maple and Sligo over what the traffic level that they have now. The last thing I will say is that, related to traffic and what the county does, I wish the county would get the damn large buses off Maple Avenue and Houston Avenue. There's a long-standing agreement with the community that they would use small buses on there. They haven't addressed the issue. They're claiming that there's some legal issue with the person who supplies those buses, and the community has been very patient at dealing with that issue, and it's just another situation where the county basically doesn't listen to us. They don't listen to us about the rebate, they didn't listen to us about this traffic issue, and they don't listen to us about the buses.
Councilor Clay.
I, for one, am tired of being ignored and dismissed by the county, and I think that, by the county executive's office, I think that this is another example of this. I understand your position, Mayor, that we want to be cooperative and all get along, but it seems like we're always putting it out there to be cooperative, and that we don't get a lot of that back. I want to say I really empathize with the people in the Ritchie, Oswego, Geneva, and Mississippi area about, and the other, I don't know if I missed anybody there, about having, folks engage in the name calling when people are just having a discussion about trying to address the traffic and safety concerns in their neighborhood. I have unfortunately, been witness to that in other areas in Ward 2, and I know it's really unpleasant, and I know that that is, that's not what it's about. It's about looking for a solution, and I would agree that the neighbors have been very proactive about, trying to come up with workable solutions. However, I'm concerned about the solutions with traffic restrictions going from Sligo Creek Parkway to Maple Avenue, particularly because I think that the ultimate result of that, if you look at it, is that all that traffic is going to move onto Lincoln Avenue, and they're either going to enter at Larch Avenue and come up Lincoln and across Lincoln to probably Boyd and then Sherman or Lee, or they're going to come up Jackson Avenue and go across to Lincoln or Boyd and then go over to Sherman or Lee over to Maple Avenue. They're still going to get around that no left turn, and that is one of the ways that makes the most sense to do it, especially if you go over to, if they take Lincoln to Boyd to Sherman, then they can just turn left on Ritchie Avenue because there's no left turn restriction there, and I don't think it'll be very long before people figure that out. I think one of the interesting outcomes of the very painful Long Branch Sligo traffic calming 6-week experiment and 4-year social experiment has been that what we set out to look at, and I think the thing that was really enforced in that is that the only really acceptable traffic calming solution is to slow people down and have them obey the laws use speed bumps or stop signs or things on the road essentially, or possibly talked a couple times about lowering the overall speed limit on our interior streets, is to disperse the traffic. And the big problem with the county's decision is that it does exactly the opposite of allowing the traffic to be dispersed throughout these neighborhoods. It concentrates the traffic. It would be great if it would concentrate it onto the arterial streets like Sligo Creek Parkway. I would argue that Maple Avenue is set up. It's a broad, wide street. It's as broad as any arterial street and broader than many of them in the city. Carroll and Philadelphia, but the problem is those streets are already overburdened, and they don't go directly to where the people are looking to go to that are using these cut-through routes, which is very problematic. So I wouldn't support at this time the no left turns, the actual sort of restrictions of use, because I'm pretty darn sure that the immediate result of that is that pretty much all that traffic is going to move onto Lincoln Avenue, and it's going to come into our neighborhood through primarily Larch Avenue and Elm Avenue. I would support like I said, any of the other things in the road, any of the traffic circles, but not the time or turn restrictions, because the end result is just going to move it, one street over, and that street's going to be Lincoln Avenue. If I'm in the minority on this, which it sounds so far like I am, the thing that I would ask is that you not do to my constituents the same thing that the county did to the people in the Ritchie Neighborhood Association, which is to take this back out to our broader Tacoma Park community, which includes the people in Ward 2, and do more noticing about exactly what this is here, how we're considering it. Get out to those neighborhood associations and make sure that they've been included in this process and they've been heard in this process. I know that folks came to the hearing, but I just don't want to see us turn around and do to the Ward 2 constituents what the county has done to the Ward 4 and I guess Ward 5 constituents.
Councilmember Schultz.
Thank you, Mayor. Until this process, I got involved in this studying this issue a few months ago. If you'd asked me where Hilltop Road was or some of these other streets, I wouldn't have known where they were because I've never used them. But over the last several weeks, I've spent a great bit of time talking to city staff, met with Richard Payne of the Ritchie Civic Association for over an hour, he and I one-on-one, so that I could thoroughly understand his community's point of view and their situation. And I've learned a lot, and I've also reflected very long on the issues and the fights that our community went through a year or two ago in trying to figure out how to get cut-through traffic coming off of New Hampshire and going up to Carroll through Ward 6. So you might say, well, why would a city council member from Ward 6 really care much about what's going on over on Hilltop Road or Ritchie Avenue, clean across the city of Tacoma Park? Well, if it wasn't for the late coming idea of putting a left turn restriction at Maple and Sligo Parkway onto Maple Avenue, there might not be too much of a concern. But the simple fact is that while everybody along Maple Avenue and Ritchie is concerned about solving their problems, all they're trying to do, but unwittingly, is transfer the problem to other communities, such as the ones in Ward 6 and such as the one that Council Member Clay has just been talking to us about. And what I have gotten is an awful lot of email from residents in Ward 6, including Hillwood Manor, who use Sligo Creek Parkway to take their kids to school or to after-school programs or things of, whatever is going on. We got the two schools there, the library and all of that. A number of people have expressed dismay that these folks who are trying to do this, including carpools of taking kids along Sligo Creek up to Maple Avenue and not be able to make a left turn, are just sort of like thinking, well, I guess we're just sort of being neglected over here because, we're sort of more than 3/4 of a mile away, therefore we're classified as cut-through traffic. But unfortunately, that's not the reality. The reality is that we are residents of the city of Tacoma Park. And really all this points up philosophically is that every time you try to close a street to solve a problem, all you're doing is moving the problem into somebody else's neighborhood. It's a no-win. It's really a lose-lose situation. And notwithstanding Deputy Manager Ludlow's observations, accurate though they are, that there are precedents for some of these restrictions, most of those restrictions don't take out whole swaths of streets, as has the county's decision with Sligo Park Hills. A lot of the restrictions are very small and only affect a very few number of people. Needless to say, the county has, in its unlimited brilliance, decided to do this and sort of figure, well, we've made our decision, now Tacoma Park can figure it out. And so, it sounds a little bit like the budget process we just went through. So I would say that on behalf of my constituents, I would be unalterably opposed to putting a no left turn restriction at the corner of Sligo Creek Parkway onto Maple Avenue. I talked with Richard Payne about this, and I understand his concerns. And by the way, I agree with what my colleagues up here said. I don't fault the residents of Ritchie Avenue about bringing this issue to us the way they have. I thought their presentation has been eminently reasonable, and any of those people who think differently, if they lived on Ritchie Avenue, they would think differently. And so then it's unfortunate that we have to get down to this level. It's just a question of whose ox is getting gored here, and as long as it's not your ox, well, then the guy whose ox is getting gored, he's got a bad attitude. So, I thought Tacoma Parkins were a little better minded than that, but I understand we're really all kind of human beings underneath. So, we have to come up with a solution, and having given it my best thought on this thing, and considering the possibilities of what would happen if you did put a no left turn sign there at Maple Avenue. I'm fearful of some of the things that Councilmember Clay just described. I'm also concerned that other people might decide they're coming across Sligo Creek Parkway just to take Flower Avenue. Narrow as and windy as it is, once you figure out a route, the more obscure it is, the more gleeful you get to have figured out that you found it. And, it goes wiggle, wiggle, wiggle all the way up, and all of a sudden, boom, you're at Carroll Avenue at that intersection. And you say, I can see, I can just make a left here, go down 50 yards, and make a right through the hospital. And by golly, I'm on Maple Avenue. I can go any damn direction I want. And so the next thing you know, we're going to have people driving through the hospital ground. They're going to go wherever they can go in order to get their kids to school on time. If you want to call that, just dispersing, I suppose you can, but let's think about the people who are trying to transport kids to use our city facilities, which they pay taxes for. Therefore, where I come around on this whole thing is that I like the idea of a temporary no right turn sign at Ritchie Avenue from Maple. And I use the word temporary because basically I'm philosophically opposed to these restrictions for the reasons I've cited already. Give the city the time to complete the work on the Public Works project and various street traffic calming measures that could be installed, and better sidewalks along Ritchie Avenue and at the intersection with Oswego and Geneva, because the goal really isn't so much to reduce traffic volume. That's an ultimately a problem we're going to end up losing, because traffic volumes are increasing as the population densities grow and grow and grow in this part of the greater Washington area. But what we can do is slow the traffic down, and that relates purely to safety. Safety is the paramount issue. And as long as we can get people to slow down, whatever you have, whatever tricks you can do, and we all know what they are, let's give Ritchie Avenue a chance, and then when that's all in place, then we can remove that sign and proceed from there. And that's what I would support doing until or unless I hear a better idea coming up from my colleagues. And I would also finally say that if the City Council decides that, notwithstanding my view, that we ought to put a left turn sign at Maple, no left turn restriction at Maple and Sligo, then I would absolutely request that this be brought to, we have another community discussion, a public hearing on that, so that the citizens of Ward 6 and perhaps Ward 2 can have their day in court. So that's all I wanted to say at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a lot of things to say. I know you're surprised to hear that. But first I want to say I believe that the solution needs to involve everyone, not just those who will benefit. We need to look for a solution that will at least address the issues in some fashion of all the people who will be affected. Despite the county's decision to use a very peculiar definition of affected neighborhoods, I believe Tacoma Park can do better than that. I do note that with
minor exceptions, nobody mentioned that all the traffic we're talking about diverting onto Sligo Creek Parkway would therefore add to the already horrendous traffic at Sligo Creek Parkway and Piney Branch, and therefore folks would turn up. They would either continue on Maple, as you suggested, go up to Flower that way, maybe they'd turn on Kennebec, Houston, Domer, etc. So I do believe that people in those neighborhoods, who are in fact extremely close, as you heard this evening, to Park Valley Road. In fact, some of my neighbors are closer to that intersection than many of the other people in Sligo Park Hills. So it's a bit interesting, to me anyway, that they're not included, but I do think they need to be included. And for me, I understand the concern about traffic. I live on a very busy street. It's a serious problem. But for me, a much more serious problem is safety. And I listened very carefully when we had the testimony of those people who were in favor of the traffic restrictions. I heard two things mainly. I heard concerns about the volume of traffic, and I heard concerns about safety, particularly reckless driving and speeding through the neighborhoods. And I heard them again tonight. But I'm sure many of you have observed the following, that all the law-abiding citizens in Tacoma Park and elsewhere dutifully stop at the stop signs. They dutifully observe the speed limits. Perhaps they'll go 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, but basically the law-abiding citizens obey the signs. The problem is that the speeding and reckless drivers will not obey the signs. So we can dutifully put up signs, no right turn here, no left turn there, additional stop signs and so on, and people will just continue to go through them at high speed. I observed this in my neighborhood. I've observed it in other neighborhoods. It's not just DC traffic that does it. It's all over. So I have become convinced that the only way to deal with this issue, and it in essence deals with both of the issues, is to have serious physical structures to slow traffic. We've been talking about these this evening. Tacoma Park is known among my friends who don't live here as speed bumps are us. And I always tell them, we don't have just speed bumps. We've got all kinds of things here. Man, we've got traffic circles. We've got, you name it, we've got it. And I believe that's what will ultimately need to be done to slow the traffic in a way that prevents the reckless driving. And I don't mean the speed bumps that the county puts in place. Those things, they're designed to be 20 miles an hour. I regularly go over them at 30, and I'm frequently passed, because I'm going too slowly, by people going 35 or 40. So I don't think those speed bumps are the answer. I hate to say it, but the Tacoma Park speed bumps, which are designed to be 5 miles an hour and are pretty close to it, are the way to go. So ultimately, I believe that is what needs to be put in place on Ritchie Avenue and any of the other streets that have reckless and speeding driving. I think the signs will just be a temporary fix. I do want to comment on the traffic study. I, in fact, read the traffic study, and several people in my neighborhood read the traffic study. And the traffic study has some very strange things in it. My personal favorite is the traffic study documented 746 cars in the morning rush hour using the proposed restricted roads. 746, over 700 cars. But inexplicably, they only count the impact of 106 cars on the alternative roads. And they assign half of those to Sligo Creek Parkway and half at Philadelphia Piney Branch. So they dutifully ignore roughly 640 cars, or 86% of the measured traffic. If they used their logic of splitting, then The proposed restrictions will cause traffic at Sligo Creek Parkway, Piney Branch, and Philadelphia Avenue, Piney Branch. Those intersections will increase by 300 to 400 cars per hour during rush hour. In total during rush hour. Now, we actually confirmed this with the County Traffic Engineering Office, that this was, in fact, a correct reading of the study. They didn't provide an answer for why they only counted 14% of the vehicles. They just kept explaining that the study was only asked to count diversion of the vehicles from one access road, which was the Sligo Creek Park Valley Road. And they don't count vehicles registered within 3/4 of a mile as needing to be diverted. 3/4 of a mile, you may notice, includes a lot of Ward 5, as well as lots of other places in Tacoma Park. Now, I should note that when I went through the traffic examiner's summary, she did not address these problems, and they were raised both at the public hearing and through emails to her and the traffic office, engineering office at the county level. So we've not had any response to those. I do note, as I mentioned earlier, that with the proposed restrictions, the county restrictions, and the additional ones proposed for Tacoma Park, that that traffic, of course, now will go on, as I just indicated, either Philadelphia or Sligo Creek Parkway, unless it wends its way laboriously through these various, take a left turn here and a right turn there, and eventually manage to get on Ritchie or some similar place. Pretty complicated. And so the question then becomes, will the people on those streets, whether it's Lincoln or Sherman or Lee or Kennebec, Houston or Domer or any of the other streets, will they be coming before the City Council and asking for traffic restrictions? One would think so, given the emails I have received. In fact, I'm a little surprised that they let me come down here without twisting my arm off. Going back to the traffic study, there's another very puzzling thing, and that's the definition of affected area. And hence the discussion, the lengthy discussion over many years with the Sligo Park Hills, and then more recently with the Ritchie Avenue Citizens Association. Those were defined as the affected area. Well, those are the people who will benefit, the people on Maple Avenue that we heard from tonight, the people in Ward 5, and elsewhere. They were not part of these discussions. None of those neighborhood groups were contacted, even though the county process says they're supposed to be contacted. None of them were contacted. We didn't hear about this until January of this year. And our questions and answers were ignored because they said they would be addressed at the public hearing. Of course, the public hearing, you only had 3 minutes to talk. Hard to get a complicated argument in. Hence the reason I'm going on and on is because I don't have 3 minutes. I can go on as long as I want. Sorry, guys and ladies. Right. Okay. I sincerely hope that this very mysterious and flawed county procedure will not be used in Tacoma Park. It just divides us one from another. This is an extremely serious problem. People have, in fact, been killed by speeding traffic. On Sligo Creek Parkway, we finally got a couple of county speed bumps because Walt Penny was killed. I really hope we don't have to have somebody else killed before we get some action. So I believe our Tacoma Park process must be better than that. We have to include all who will be affected, and I think we have to take account of their concerns in a serious manner. I also believe we must include some kind of, as was proposed, monitoring and evaluation of whatever we decide to do to see, one, if it's working, even partially, and if it needs modification, and that we be ready to try something different if it isn't working. As Councilmember Schultz pointed out, people are very ingenious about finding alternative ways of getting around these things. And I'll come back to my most important point. I really urge us to do real traffic calming. I know there are people who do not like the speed bumps. I don't like the speed bumps. One of my cars always bottoms out on a speed bump right around the corner from me, and every single time I go over it, there's that little noise as I go over it, no matter how slow I go over it. Nevertheless, that speed bump is responsible for slowing the traffic on Maple Avenue right near Erie. Without that thing, they just roar down that street. One slight clarification on the Sligo Creek Parkway and Maple Avenue intersection. Unless there are signs at Geneva and/or Mississippi, which I assume are in the plan, you'll need a right turn only there, because what will happen if you do left turn, no left turn, is people will just go straight and end up going up on Mississippi and/or on Geneva. So we need to make sure that that we have signs at Geneva and Mississippi if we're going to go on the signs, or we in fact use a right turn only at Sligo Creek Parkway and Maple. I don't necessarily favor that. I have a very slight, and I emphasize slight, preference for no right turn from Maple onto Ritchie, because I think that is the least, what would I call it, the least intrusive of the options. I believe it will make a significant dent in the traffic. I believe that the people who ignore signs will continue to ignore signs. The people who will go around in bizarre, creative ways will go around in bizarre, creative ways, whatever we do. And then I'll end with one little concern. I sincerely hope, I really sincerely hope that other neighborhoods will not feel they have to retaliate. I hope they feel they can come to the City Council, be heard. We will work on the process with you. We will try to come up with a solution that is the least disruptive we can, but which addresses the problem. The idea of closing roads on some permanent basis or some similar thing is really not a very good solution, because it does exactly what we don't want to do, which is turn neighbor against neighbor. That's all it does. It just makes people really angry about it. This is a mile-long stretch of roads that are going to be affected by it, and a mile is a huge part of Tacoma Park. Thanks.
Councilmember Robinson.
I'll try to keep it short. I made a bunch of notes in all this in all our time here, and I'll just kind of read through them. I did drive through the Sligo Park Hills several times over last weekend, but I haven't observed it during rush hour. I intend to do that. Thanks, Terry, for bringing all this to our attention, and thanks Sligo Park Hills and the county for helping us move forward and looking at things broadly. But I think it's a cheap way out. I think it's top-down thinking. I think it's unidirectional. It's not fair. And I think that it needs to be challenged, the actions from by the county and by Sligo Park Hills. Thanks, Richard Payne and the Ritchie Citizens Association and the folks on Maple for working with everybody. Thanks, Alvaro, for committing to turn these very bright lights down within the next couple of weeks, so I don't have to wear my hat or my sunglasses anymore. Now, the no left turn onto Maple, I think that's mostly in the mornings. I'll bet right now it's largely school kids getting delivered to Piney Branch Elementary School. I think if you look at the numbers, and forcing the kids right and then do a U-turn in the Adventist Hospital parking lot and then coming back down Maple, will not be a good solution, and that right turn only when you get up to Sligo and Maple will seriously affect wards 2, 3, 4, and 5, as far as I can tell. So, and 6, Fred, are you in 6? You are, aren't you? Yeah, and 6. I don't think that putting signs in and removing them later on is going to be easy. It wasn't easy in my ward, although it did finally happen when we put in traffic calming. That took many years to get the signs out that were restricting turns. I'm glad they're gone. I fought to have them removed, but it was not easy. In Ritchie, I think Oswego is a non-issue as regards traffic, although I understand that they want to stop a crossing, some kind of crossing to get to Hefner Auditorium, but I think as far as traffic goes, it's a non-issue. I think it's good to slow the flow of traffic throughout town because there's more of it and we only have a certain amount of roads. But I don't think we can clog and stop the filters. Our roads are our filters. I don't think you can just clog them with closing streets. I think that's really a bad idea. And you have to kind of balance the pain. Let's say Philadelphia, which is already at an F intersection as far as my recollection is at Philadelphia, and Piney Branch. So that's already painful. And if people go up Ritchie and there's a whole lot of speed bumps and chicanes and chokers and reboundable lanes and camera enforcement and speed trailers and sidewalks and other traffic calming measures, that will also be painful for people, and so there will be a certain balancing of the pain. Again, nothing of this helps anybody in my ward, and so I'm basically mad at the county. I think the idea of monitoring is good for traffic throughout the city, and I'm assuming assuming that we're going to go that direction to some extent, so that we can more effectively balance the various painful situations we have. In my darker moments, I even consider forcing traffic into Sligo Park Hills in the off hours, the times when you can get in there. Let's somehow funnel all the traffic in the city into Sligo Park Hills and see how they like that. But that's just in my dark moments. I'm not really serious about that. The things I think we ought to do are to appeal the decision by the county with Rubens Points and others. I think we ought to sue the county for unilateralism, liability, and blindness to broader issues in whatever way we can. I'm not interested in any signs in our right-of-way until we get an appropriate response from the county in these matters. And I am for full implementation of the traffic calming measures on Ritchie Avenue as are elucidated in Attachment B that we have here, which is a chokers at Ritchie and Oswego, chokers on east and west approaches of the curve on Ritchie to reduce the going around the curve, and reboundable lanes seems like an appropriate thing. Designating a school zone at the end of Ritchie, bolstering that with speed camera enforcement, use the speed trailer, put sidewalk on Oswego, put a sidewalk on Geneva. I am not interested in putting the signs up first and then taking them out once we put the traffic restriction or traffic calming measures in place. I think that's putting the cart before the horse. So that's the one thing I disagree with. But I'm also interested in putting traffic calming measures on Maple Avenue. In fact, I could see narrowing Maple Avenue considerably, putting more trees and pedestrian-friendly elements along Maple Avenue, which would slow the traffic down. I'm not against speed bumps on Maple Avenue at all, or raised intersections, as is noted in Attachment B. I'm completely in favor in rerouting the empty school buses and having full use of Ritchie Avenue again on the Ritchie Avenue, on the Ritchie Citizens Association attachment. So, I guess my last point is on the Maple Avenue that if we narrow Maple Avenue, there'll still be enough backup on Philadelphia so that going slow down Maple Avenue won't make any difference. I walk across Maple Avenue every morning, and people do zoom along there. They'll slow down for pedestrians, but if they were going more slowly, I don't think it would make any difference to their throughput time getting from Maple up Philadelphia and across Piney Branch, because that's already a very dismal situation. So there's a lot of dismal talk about a difficult situation. I hope I've made my position clear.
I would say at this point that we have 2 council members who have said no to any turn restrictions. We have 5 council members who have reluctantly said yes to some turn restriction. Of those 5, we have 3 reluctant go for the Ritchie restriction and 2 for the Maple restriction. Does anybody want to kind of change their Maple or their Ritchie designation? Can we get a majority to go forward with something? Councilmember Wright.
I would be willing to change my choice if it means that we are blocked and don't have any option. So I would be willing to, I said I have a preference for the Sligo Creek Parkway restriction, but I would switch to Ritchie if that were the only option, if there was no one else willing to switch. But again, I would make that stipulation with this being a temporary switch until we can, as quickly as possible, get traffic calming on Geneva, Mississippi, and Ritchie. And I also am very sympathetic to Colleen's point, and I think this is true whether it's at Ritchie or at Sligo Creek. Whatever closure we put, temporary closure we put in, that should be very well publicized for our next round of discussions about this.
Okay.
We should go out of our way to do that.
Thank you. And I would just note that when you said temporary closure, I always say temporary restriction because we're not closing anything.
True.
So we now have 4 people who are ready to go forward with turn restriction on Ritchie. I didn't keep as close tabs on the sense of people on the 2 signs on the city right-of-way. In the county recommendation, I don't remember hearing, I think what I heard was that people were ready to go forward with that. Am I incorrect with that?
I care not to be cooperative.
I have a question.
Thank you.
So,
that way too.
Could we put a sign that says on Geneva and Mississippi that are restrictions, the non-morning, you can't go up there in the morning, and tell the county to go to hell. And that would mean that everyone would just go up Hilltop. We could choose to do that, yes? Does that explain that a little bit?
Say that one again.
We could put a sign, because they want us to put a sign at...
One thing is confusing, just to clarify.
Yeah.
From Maple Avenue to Mississippi on this map
Yeah.
is called Hilltop.
Okay.
Maple to Mississippi,
Right.
Right.
That is called Hilltop.
Okay.
And that's where there are residents who live on Hilltop, who live in the city of Tacoma Park, who are in Sligo Park Hills Association.
I see. And
Right?
I guess if we didn't put that sign in the right-of-way, they would just put a sign starting at Hilltop.
At Hilltop and Mississippi.
Right.
Right.
After Mississippi.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So, I mean,
Which would,
it's sort of irrelevant whether we put the sign up or not, right? Because,
Well, not to the people on Mississippi and even Hilltop.
no, that's what I'm saying, like, if we say to the county, we're not going to put the sign up, they'll still get what they want, and we'll just hurt the people on
Exactly.
That's right.
Right.
correct.
Yes.
Right.
That's
So,
correct.
I think you kind of have to put the sign up,
Yes.
as much as I want to be abstinent to the county.
Okay. So I think the majority want to go ahead and put the signs up. Councilmember Clay.
So the beauty of Josh's suggestion is that, so we put signs up that are actually on Mississippi and Geneva. People drive past it like they always do, and then they run into their street that they're used to as their cut-through traffic. But here's the beauty of it. We have 5 police officers on at a time for the small area of Tacoma Park, and they have 3 police officers on at a time for their big area of Silver Spring. And I have to wonder how much energy they're going to put to parking a traffic officer there for a very long period of time. I think we can out-enforce them.
Must be after 11.
I'm not sure. It sounds like, what I heard was Councilmember Wright wanting to go that way, but deciding that was not the way to go.
Really?
It also leaves...
Because I really totally support you in that.
Doesn't it also,
in any way that I can.
Doesn't it also leave the people who live on the Tacoma Park portion of Hilltop, there are houses along there, right? They're exposed.
That's one of those people is sitting right here.
Right. Yeah.
No, how are they exposed? This is red. Doesn't that mean they live
on this
in
map between Maple Avenue and Mississippi? That's Hilltop.
And there are houses.
And there are houses along there. One of the
Those are in Tacoma Park.
Right.
Yeah. With a tomato.
What?
It's going to go that way.
So, Josh, you're saying sign on Geneva, sign on Mississippi, and then the county puts a sign on Hilltop.
Right. And Colleen's point is then that
they get there and if they're law-abiding, they have to make a U-turn and go back, right?
If they're not law-abiding, we have officers on our streets.
I
that goes
see. And we force them into Sligo Park Hills.
I think at this hour, we don't need this discussion.
I heard a majority saying, put the signs as recommended. Councilmember Schultz.
Yeah, I will say yes, but I would like just to say also that the plan that the hearing officer or examiner came up with is an awfully blunt instrument. Just to sort of say, oh, no traffic at all can go this way from this point in time to this point in time. That's kind of like using a meat cleaver to open a peanut. Oftentimes, I mean, there's so much technology out there. You could put a red light there, like they oftentimes do at entrance ramps on expressways, to slow down the access of cars into the stream that's already on the expressway. Just put a traffic light there at the intersection of Mississippi and Hilltop, and every so often it turns green and it lets a number of cars go up that way. And then it turns red and it waits, and people can choose to sit in line and wait their turn to go up that street, or they'll say to themselves, there must be a better way. And that way, you talk about filtering, you're doing it with technology. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that's what should be done. I'm just saying that it's an illustration of some creative solutions that Montgomery County wasn't prepared to think about.
Oh, where's the plug for all these lights?
I'm getting a headache, but
yeah.
We can just wave at you. I should have brought my pistol.
It's after 11 o'clock now.
Can you tell?
People, calm down.
So I will support putting in the signs for the sake of euphony.
Unless I see 4 hands go up in opposition to what I'm saying, we're recommending to put the signs in.
I oppose.
Okay, we've got 2 opposed. We've got a majority. That one's done. Is there something else that we need to decide for what goes into our resolution?
Yes. My light is on.
Okay. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you. I think that as we've heard at the public hearing and as we've heard tonight during the public comment session, the neighborhood is appreciative of the attention to this difficult issue, but there are residents of the city who are not going to be entirely happy because they're going to be affected by this. And so I think that part of the resolution must include some prioritization of the traffic calming measures so that these restrictions are in place for the shortest amount of time, assuming that the traffic monitoring shows that, traffic calming measures resolve the issue, and we can be more Tacoma Parkish and more friendly with our neighborhoods, with our neighbors.
Can I ask a clarification? On that, you're saying that there's prioritization to do these, not one type within the Ritchie Avenue versus another?
Right, to do the traffic calming measures along Ritchie Avenue or wherever else the impact is, so that we can remove the traffic restrictions as rapidly as possible if the traffic calming measures are successful.
Council member, I don't know who came on first. Right.
I would go one step further and say that we should actually give ourselves a timeline by which to have those traffic calming devices installed. Daryl could give us a reasonable time estimate, and we could actually put it into the resolution, whether it's 6 months or 9 months to get it done.
And I imagine part of that's going to be dealing with time frame and winter, depending on when implementation of signs go forward. So I imagine it's probably, if we're talking that the county is probably going to install signs in, it sounds like August, September,
Yeah.
then we're probably looking at potential spring for kind of a next step in terms of, I'm not sure if some of the things would be implemented in the fall.
Yeah, I guess my recommendation at this point is, I think we would want to hire somebody to work on the planning and the design of this. There may be some of the things that are proposed that aren't exactly the best choice. So that's what I would want to expedite, is getting that going. So
I concur.
I'm not sure exactly when I can say installation will occur, but I think I appreciate the suggestion that we get a good timeline about how we can rapidly move this along.
Yeah, I would say more than I appreciate the suggestion. I would say that, as exampled by something that Councilmember Robbins and I talk about very frequently, we still don't have parking meters adjusted on Laurel, right? So to me, put the number in there and you drive forward to meet that number. Give me some reasonable number, whether it's 9 months, 6 months, and that's the target. We can come back if you don't meet that, but I want to be very clear that there's a date by which we are shooting to have this resolved in the resolution.
And as a corollary to that, before I get to Councilmember Robinson, if the city manager could remind us if my sense is that whatever we look at for implementation of other traffic calming measures, we would need to put money in the budget?
These would be eligible expenses through the speed camera fund. As a reminder, we do have a number of consultants, engineers, et cetera, that the city council has already approved that contract, so we could do the work under that. So that should certainly expedite it. Certainly, I think as we examine some options, one of the things we would want to do is bring that back to the council, because obviously lots of you have expressed a desire to have traffic calming measures or sidewalks or other things in your ward, so certainly I would want to come back to you all and just have a conversation about how much money would go into this one area versus other parts of the city. But we do certainly have a number of things in place that would expedite it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Robinson. And remember, we have one more item after this.
Yes. Very, very quickly, I agree with this notion of putting in the traffic calming measures quickly on Ritchie and Geneva, perhaps Oswego. I'd like to see that turnaround with the consultants very quick. And in fact, I'd like to see the items put in place this summer or early in the fall, so that we can then not have to put up the sign. That would be my preference.
I thank you for that.
I've seen Public Works hustle when they feel like it, and I think they can. I think they can do it now. That's wrong. Not when they feel like it. When they do it. I've seen them hustle. I'm not trying to cast aspersions on their ability to prioritize.
Thank you. Do we need anything else for staff to complete the resolution?
No, we'll bring that back next week.
Okay.
But I think Councilmember Robinson made a very excellent point on that.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Okay, now, at
Don't you think
11:19.
they're all going to stay for the Montgomery County
I
College?
don't think so. I think maybe the Gazette reporter will, the sound folks
He's
will.
asleep.
We will.
He will.
but-
Did you get all that?
Okay. Hopefully, we can make fairly short order of the last agenda item. What I wanted to do was to take the opportunity to catch everybody up on where we are with the Montgomery College Facilities Master Plan process. They go through this process, I think it's I get confused on this, every 5 years or every 10 years? I think it's every 10 years with interim updates at 5 years? Anyway, they were due to complete this process a year or two ago. It got delayed. What this process is a mechanism basically to set up state funding for public colleges in Maryland. And what they have to do is identify educational needs, future educational needs, and the space required to meet those needs, and what deficits they have in space to do that. Identify the space need, put together a plan that addresses how they can fulfill that need, and submit it to the state to set up funding. So that this facilities master plan, which is now kind of restarted again, is ready to go forward. Remember, we had a resolution, those of us who were on the council in 2008, I believe it was July 2008, we had a resolution for covering our reaction to the facilities master plan process at that point. What this plan that is now going forward again would do is the college is required in certain ways to have consultation with the city and the neighbors about what they're proposing. Their timeline at this point is that they're going to submit basically the materials that we were provided here by the college, which is the executive summary labeled draft that is 5 pages long, and then the 2 color maps of the campus. They're essentially going to provide that to their Montgomery College board at their June meeting, I believe June 19th. That will be part of a slightly bigger packet that also incorporates information about the Rockville campus, the Germantown campus, and the workforce development aspect of what they do. This will eventually be part of a much larger submission that they put together that is due to be filed with Maryland Higher Education Commission October 1. So their board is getting this information, which was just made available to us last Thursday. So this is kind of an updated version of the executive summary, but there's a whole lot of material that goes along with it, behind it, that nobody will be getting until later in the process. I don't know, maybe July. The board doesn't have a meeting usually in August, but this year, given that they have a new president who's going to be coming on board and arriving in town August 2nd, they may in fact have an August board meeting. And then at their September board meeting, what they do is they go into closed session to discuss whatever the conditions are on this and any of their feedback. They then come out into their regular board meeting and adopt it for submittal by October 1st to the state. I'm not quite sure how they get to have their discussions about what they want to do in closed session. I don't quite understand that. That's not how we have to operate according to the state, but that appears to be the way that they operate. That is the way they've operated when representatives from the city have gone to board meetings in the past. We've had recommendations from our Montgomery College Neighborhood Advisory Committee in the past. They have still been somewhat active, although much less so. The chair, Francis Phipps, has been involved in some of the continuing discussion. The neighbors are trying to follow this as well. There's been a hiatus while basically this whole process went dormant for various reasons. I believe it had to do with partly with the staff at the college being shifted to address the Germantown campus and whatever was going on there, and then something with the consultants, but they finally kind of got back to it, and it's all revved up very recently. The proposal from the provost at the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus was that if we, the city, wanted to submit some comments that would go along with this draft that you see here, that we could, that they would provide space for us to do that. The hope when he made that offer about, I don't know, I think it was May 18th, was that we would have had, we and the neighbors would have had the chance to see more than what we finally got on Friday. It may be that folks feel like we want to submit something. It may be that folks feel like maybe the thing to submit would be our resolution of July 2008. Maybe nothing has changed since then. That's in the packet. We have some proposed language from Francis Phipps, chair of MCNAC, about some additional language that might be submitted along with that resolution. We could just say, well, gee, maybe we won't put anything in. The longer it is, the more likely it'll be an appendix. The shorter it is, the more likely it'll be included as the city's comment in what's going forward to the board as a draft. Let me just point out a couple things about the memorandum of agreement that the city, the college, and the county signed, which is at the back of our packet, which was signed in 2002. I think the important things to notice about this, if you go to the agreement on page 2, it says at the top of page 2, whereas to maintain their collaborative relationship, the parties wish to enter into an agreement whereby Montgomery College voluntarily agrees under these unique circumstances to submit any and all plans for proposed development in the current or future historic preservation district in the city of Tacoma Park. So that is, we're talking basically, I believe, about Block 69, what's referred to as Block 69, which is on the, when you look at the map here on the back, it's the section up at the top, excuse me, up at the top of the page, that block surrounded by Tacoma, Philadelphia, Chicago, and New York. So it's those three areas in there. Then it talks in the next section about the college agrees to submit any and all plans in the current or future historic preservation district, saving and accepting property now owned by Montgomery College. So that's why those areas are drawn, those three areas in there. Since those are already owned, they're exempted from that need to submit plans. And Then on page 3, Montgomery College agrees that it shall consult with the city of Tacoma Park and the local community when making any major or substantial changes or alterations to the existing structures designated on Appendix B. So that's where the existing structures which are outlined, they're saying that they will consult for any major or substantial changes or alterations. And during the planning for any alteration, construction, or revitalization of the exterior of the existing buildings. So what we don't necessarily have here is any of the specifics about what the college might be thinking about doing with some of the exteriors of any of those buildings. I know that one of the things that they're talking about is the possibility of needing to do something on the interior of the, what's it called, I want to say the Theater Arts Building, but it's not called that. What's it called, the triangular building?
Black Box Theater?
Yeah, the Black Box Theater. That there's something in here that they may want to fill in the center of that, which you basically can't see unless you go into the building. It's the hole, it's like the hole in the middle of the donut, but the donut is a triangle. So I know that there's question in the community about whether if we submit anything as something to go into this draft submittal for the board package, whether that would be taken as a sign by the college that they have consulted with us, and therefore here's our comments on the consultation. I think at this point, my recommendation is that it's preliminary to submit comments, given the short time frame, the short turnaround. If we want to get comments in, given that the board is only getting this small bit of information, sure, it's nice to get something in early to get their attention, but if there's something that we feel is important to say, it's probably good for us to, in addition, for us to get comments from the neighborhood, and the neighborhood hasn't really had a chance to look at what we've gotten at this late date with this short turnaround. So I've tried to summarize what has been a fairly long, fairly messy process. Let me point out that when this facilities master plan is submitted and accepted, adopted, whatever the state does with it, that the first opportunity for the college to actually pursue the next step and start designing something to fulfill these space needs is when the money would become available July 1, 2014. So that's the earliest that money would be available to do anything that is addressed in this, basically in this concept. What they're doing here is saying, okay, we've assigned square foot to meet needs. We think we have some spaces to put square footage. It means a blob here, a blob there. That by necessity, from restrictions on how big you can put something, might mean a certain footprint, might mean a certain number of stories, but beyond that, they don't know. I think I've covered most everything. I see a couple of lights. I think Councilmember Wright, and then Councilmember Klein.
So I would agree that I don't think we should submit something with this plan that comments, with this to the board that comments on what's here, because I don't feel like it's really a plan, and we've seen it change a lot. It's a draft. It doesn't actually, the facility master plan is about the size of a phone book.
Right.
And this is 5 pages, so I want to be very clear that we actually haven't seen the plan, and we haven't been consulted with about it. I think what we should send to the board is a letter that says, we continue to want to work with the college and anxiously await seeing the master plan and want to be consulted and have our input considered into that. But this does not constitute it, and we look forward to getting the facility master plan and having a true consultation with the city and the community. That would be my suggestion. Puts us on record that we clearly don't think this is consultation, and asks to see the full plan, which is what we want.
Councilmember Klein?
I think I'm going to disagree a little bit, but I'm going to put it out there first that I am not really well-versed in this issue. So my disagreement isn't specifically about the college. This is an observation, and here it is. So I've been on the council now for 4 years, and I frequently hear this argument that we shouldn't comment yet because it's not ripe to comment. And then afterwards, I hear from constituents, and I see where we lose the battle. And so I guess what I would put out there is that we should comment every time we have an invitation to comment, even if they give us almost no notice, and even if, because of the no notice, the text of the comment is that the mayor and the interested and or affected council members get together and just put something together. And I could go over the instances that I'm thinking about where we've had opportunities to comment and we haven't, or we've waited for some part of the process to go. One of them we just finished talking about. But
well, let's talk some more about it.
No, let's not talk anymore about that. But that's just an observation that I would like to share. And so I would recommend you comment early, often, at every opportunity, even if it's that Josh and the mayor write something up.
I agree.
Did you have additional comments?
Yes, and I think the official comment would be, since we have seen no facility, the last true draft facility master plan we saw, we drafted a resolution around. So to me, which was basically pretty disapproving of what they were proposing, to me, the only comment would be for us to resubmit the resolution to say, you know, we haven't gotten anything new, we're not being consulted, you have our opinion based on what we saw was your last iteration. That would be our comment.
And then send them that too, so
Yeah.
that's part of the current record.
So that it would be the 2008 resolution and a cover letter that says not really a whole lot's happened since then. Any other comments? No more lights. Council Member Wright and I will collaborate on a letter to go attached with the resolution. So we will distribute that, but I don't think we need to put an item on the agenda next week to have formal action by the council, since we've already adopted the resolution that we will be sending. We will get that letter out to you folks so that you have a chance to see what it is and provide any comments if you wish to do so, and we will try and do that this week. Okay. Then we are adjourned.
Thank you.